I still remember the last message she ever sent me, not because it was long, not because it explained everything, but because it didn't. It was simple, short, like it didn't carry the weight of everything that came before it, and that's what made it hit harder. Because how do you go from talking every day to one final message that feels like nothing? At first I kept rereading it, not because I didn't understand it, but because I felt like there had to be something more hidden in it, some deeper meaning, some explanation between the lines, something that would make it all make sense. But there wasn't. It said just enough to end things and not enough to explain them, and that's what messes with you, because your mind keeps trying to fill in the gaps that they left empty. I kept thinking back to everything before that message, all the conversations, all the moments that felt real, all the things she said that made it seem like we were building something. And then I'd look at that last message again, and it didn't match. It didn't feel like it came from the same person. Because how do you go from consistency to something that feels so detached, so final, without feeling final at all? The hardest part wasn't even what she said, it was what she didn't say. No real explanation, no real accountability, no real closure, just something that closed the door without ever fully acknowledging what was behind it. And that leaves you stuck in a weird place, because you're not just dealing with an ending, you're dealing with questions that never got answers. For a while I wanted to reply, not to argue, not to convince her to stay, just to understand, to ask the questions that were sitting in my head. What changed? When did it change? Was any of it real? But I didn't, because deep down I knew something. If she wanted me to understand, she would have explained it the first time. And that's a hard truth to accept, because it means the silence after that message was intentional, not confusion, not hesitation, a decision. She said what she wanted to say, and everything she didn't say was also part of that choice. After that, the conversation just stopped. No follow-ups, no checking in, no, how are you? Just silence. And silence hits different when you're used to hearing from someone every day. Because now it's not just quiet, it's absence. For a while I kept expecting another message, something more, something that would make it feel complete, but nothing came. And eventually, I had to accept something I didn't want to. That last message was really the last one. And over time, I stopped looking at it like something unfinished. I stopped expecting more, because sometimes closure doesn't come from another person. It comes from accepting what they already showed you, and what she showed me was enough, even if it wasn't explained. I still remember the last message she sent me, not because of what it said, but because of what it meant. It was the end. Not loud, not dramatic, just final. And now I understand something I didn't then. The way someone ends things tells you everything you need to know about how they saw it. So I stopped waiting for another message, stopped looking for more words, because the last one was already saying everything it needed to, just not in the way I wanted. There wasn't a big moment, no argument, no dramatic ending, no clear, this is over. That's what made it worse, because the moment I realized she stopped loving me was quiet. It was in the way she talked to me, the way her voice didn't carry the same feeling anymore, the way everything sounded the same but felt different. And that's when it hit me. Nothing happened, but everything changed. At first I tried to ignore it, because when something shifts like that, your first instinct isn't to accept it, it's to explain it. Maybe she's just tired, maybe she's stressed, maybe she just needs time. So I kept talking to her like nothing changed. Like if I stayed the same, things would go back to how they were, but they didn't. The conversations were still there, but the feeling wasn't. She still replied, still answered, still kept things going just enough, but something was missing. That energy, that warmth, that feeling like she actually wanted to be there. And you can feel that difference even if you don't want to admit it. It wasn't what she said, it was how she said it. Shorter replies, less emotion, less effort to keep things alive, like I was someone she talked to, not someone she was connected to. And that's when it started sinking in. because love doesn't disappear all at once. It fades slowly, quietly, until one day you realize you're the only one still holding on to what it used to be. And that realization hits in the smallest moments. A dry reply, a delayed answer, a conversation that used to flow that now feeling forced. I kept thinking it would come back, that maybe it was just a phase, that maybe I just needed to be more patient, so I stayed. I kept showing up the same way, hoping she'd meet me there again, but she didn't, and that's when it finally clicked. Not in a dramatic way, just a quiet realization. I'm still here, but she's not. Not really. Not in the way she used to be. That's the hardest kind of ending. Because nothing officially ended, there's no clear moment to point at. Just a slow shift until you're standing in something that looks the same, but doesn't feel the same at all. And once you feel that, you can't unfeel it. You can try to ignore it, try to convince yourself it's temporary, but deep down, you know, something changed, and it's not coming back. The moment I realized she stopped loving me was the moment I stopped feeling loved by her. No words, no explanation, just a feeling that wasn't there anymore. And now I understand something clearly. Love doesn't just live in words, it lives in effort, in presence, in consistency. And when those disappear, the feeling follows. That was the moment, not loud, not obvious, just real. Being the introvert in the relationship means loving someone who lives louder than you do. They talk easily, they fill rooms, they connect fast, and you listen, you observe, you need quiet to recharge after loving hard. Sometimes it feels like you're standing next to someone who shines effortlessly while you glow quietly. They want to go out, you want to stay in, they gain energy from people, you lose it even when you're happy. And the hardest part is not the difference. It's wondering if your quiet way of loving is enough. Because you don't always say everything, you don't always show excitement loudly, but when you choose someone, you choose them deeply. Being the introvert doesn't mean you love less. It means you love in a way that's calm, steady, and intentional, and sometimes that gets misunderstood. Being with an extrovert means watching them move through the world with ease. They make friends everywhere, they're invited everywhere, people are drawn to them naturally, and sometimes standing next to that, you wonder where you fit, not because they make you feel small, but because you don't take up space the same way. They thrive in crowds. You count the minutes until you can recharge. They talk things out loud. You process everything internally first, and there are moments where you feel guilty for needing quiet after a long day of loving them. You worry that asking for space sounds like distance, that needing alone time sounds like disinterest, but the truth is, your silence isn't absence. It's how you stay present without burning out. Loving loudly isn't the only way to love deeply, and being quieter doesn't mean you're less committed. It just means your love lives in steadiness, not spotlight. The unspoken fear is that one day you won't be enough, that they'll want more noise, more people, more energy than you can give. You worry they'll mistake your calm for boredom, your need for quiet for distance. You love them deeply but not loudly, and sometimes you wonder if that difference will matter too much. You don't compete for attention, you don't need constant stimulation, you just want connection that feels safe and real. The fear isn't that they'll leave, it's that they'll outgrow you without realizing you were loving them in the only way that feels honest to you. But loving quietly doesn't mean loving less. It means choosing them without the performance. It means staying without needing the room to notice. The right partner won't need you to be louder, they'll need you to be you. Introverts love deeply in ways that aren't always obvious. You remember details, you notice shifts in mood, you feel things before they're said. While they're talking to the room, you're paying attention to them. You're the one who listens after the party ends, the one who creates calm when everything feels loud, the one who offers presence instead of constant stimulation. Your love shows up in consistency, not volume, in choosing the same person again and again, even when it's quiet, even when no one's watching. And often your extroverted partner doesn't realize how much they need that until life gets overwhelming, until they're tired, until the noise fades, until they need someone who knows how to stay still with them. That's when your kind of love becomes the anchor. Not flashy, not loud, just steady. Introverts and extroverts can work beautifully together, but only when both ways of loving are respected. You don't need to become louder to be enough for them, and they don't need to become quieter to be right for you. What matters is understanding that your need for space isn't rejection, that their need for people isn't avoidance. You recharge differently, but you can still meet in the middle. When an extrovert learns that quiet isn't distance, And an introvert learns that excitement isn't chaos. Something soft happens. You stop trying to fix each other, you start protecting each other, you give them grounding, they give you expansion, and suddenly, the difference that once felt like a risk becomes the balance that makes the relationship work. Asking for space doesn't mean you love them less. It means you know yourself. Introverts don't pull away to create distance, they pull away to come back whole, but asking for that space can feel heavy. You worry it sounds like rejection. You worry they'll take it personally. You worry needing time alone makes you difficult to love. The right partner won't hear, "I need space," as "I don't want you." They'll hear it as, "I'm taking care of myself so I can show up better." You don't need to apologize for how you recharge. You don't need to explain it every time. Love doesn't require constant closeness to be real. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do for a relationship is step back for a moment, not to disconnect, but to return as yourself. Introverts show love in quiet, steady ways. You remember the little things they forget they mentioned. You notice when their mood shifts before they say anything. You check in without being asked. Your love isn't loud. It's consistent. It's making space for them after a long day. It's choosing them in calm moments, not just exciting ones. It's staying present when things slow down. Sometimes you wish they could see it more clearly. Not because you need praise, but because your love doesn't always announce itself. But the right partner will feel it. They'll feel it in how safe they are with you, and how calm things get around you, and how you stay, even when nothing exciting is happening. Quiet love isn't invisible. It's just not performing. And the people who value depth will always recognize it. It's easy to compare yourself to an extroverted partner, to wonder why you don't light up rooms, why you don't want constant plans, why loving quietly feels like a disadvantage. But your quiet nature isn't something to fix. It's something that brings balance. You offer depth in a world of noise. You offer presence in a world of distraction. You offer steadiness when everything else feels fast. You don't compete for attention. You create connection. And when you stop comparing, something shifts. You stop shrinking next to their energy. You stop questioning your value. You stop feeling like you need to match them to be worthy of love. You realize your calm isn't less than their excitement. It's what gives the relationship somewhere to rest. And the right partner won't ask you to be louder. They'll thank you for being grounding. One of the quiet fears is being replaced by louder energy, by someone more outgoing, more exciting, more effortless in social spaces. You worry that your calm won't be enough forever. But the truth is, people don't stay for volume. They stay for how they feel when everything slows down. An extroverted partner may enjoy attention, but they rest in safety. They recharge in understanding. They stay where they feel accepted without having to perform, and that's where you shine. You offer a place where they don't have to impress anyone, where they can be tired, where they can be real. Loud energy is easy to find, steady presence is not, and the partner who truly values you won't look for replacement. They'll recognize that your quiet way of loving is exactly what makes the relationship feel secure. Being the introvert was never a disadvantage. It just doesn't announce itself. Your love lasts because it isn't fueled by excitement alone. It's built on presence, on listening, on staying when things are quiet and ordinary. You don't love for the room, you love for the person. And that kind of love doesn't fade when the noise does. The right partner won't ask you to be louder, faster, or different. They'll appreciate that with you. Love feels steady instead of overwhelming, safe instead of performative. So if you've ever felt like your quiet nature made you harder to love, it didn't. It made you the place someone can finally rest. And that's not less, that's rare. Loving quietly doesn't mean loving halfway. It means you choose depth over display. You don't need to be the loudest voice in the room to be the most meaningful presence in someone's life. The right partner won't measure love by energy levels. They'll feel it in consistency, in safety, in how calm it feels to be with you. And one day you'll realize something simple. Your quiet wasn't something they had to tolerate. It was the reason they felt at home. We all know that one friend who's genuinely a good guy, not the fake nice kind, not the kind that's only good when it benefits him. I mean the real kind, the one who listens more than he talks, the one who checks in just because, the one who walks her home, texts, "Let me know when you get there," and actually waits for the reply, not for points, not for validation, just because that's who he is. He shows up when people call. He remembers small details. He gives effort without keeping score. And somehow, he's always the one that gets hurt. Girls say they want a good guy. They say they're tired of games, tired of being treated wrong. But when a good guy actually shows up, he gets pushed to the side, kept around just in case, treated like an option instead of a choice. He gets left on red, gets mixed signals, gets told, "You're amazing, just not right now." now. And then one day, he watches her choose someone who won't even do half of what he did. And the worst part? He doesn't complain about it, he jokes it off, acts like it doesn't bother him, plays it cool. But if you're paying attention, you see the change. He laughs less, questions himself more, starts wondering if being genuine is the problem, if caring too much makes him weak, if being a good guy even matters anymore. So he hardens a little, pulls back, stops giving as freely, not because he wants to be cold but because the world keeps teaching him that softness gets punished. It reminds me of Tanjiro from Demon Slayer. Gentle, compassionate, kind even to people who don't deserve it. People mistake that kindness for weakness until they realize how much strength it actually takes to stay good in a cruel world. That's the truth people forget. Real strength isn't loud. It doesn't dominate. It doesn't need to prove itself. Real strength is staying kind when life gives you every reason not to be. So if you know a guy like that, be there for him. Remind him that his heart isn't a flaw, that being good isn't something he needs to outgrow, because one day someone is going to see him, really see him, and they won't make him pay for the damage done by people who couldn't handle his heart. And when that happens, being a good guy will finally feel worth it. What people don't realize is how early the good guy starts changing himself without even noticing. At first it's small, he replies a little slower, he stops double texting, he thinks twice before doing something thoughtful because he's scared it'll be taken the wrong way, not appreciated, or worse, ignored. He starts asking himself questions he never used to ask. Am I doing too much? Should I care less? Why do I always end up like this? And that's dangerous, because now he's learning to dull the very traits that made him special. The world doesn't break good guys all at once. It chips away at him slowly. Every time his effort isn't matched, every time his loyalty is taken for granted, every time he's told he's perfect but still not chosen. Eventually he starts building walls, not because he wants to play games, but because he's tired of being the only one who loses when he plays fair. He watches people who treat others poorly get rewarded with attention, love, and chances, and he wonders what he's doing wrong for choosing empathy instead of ego. But here's what nobody tells him. Being a good guy isn't about what you receive immediately, it's about who you become long-term. Patience he has, the emotional awareness, the ability to love deeply without needing control. Those qualities don't disappear just because they've been overlooked. They mature, and when the right person finally comes along, those same traits won't feel like a burden. They'll feel like safety, like home, like something rare in a world full of half-effort and emotional detachment. The good guy doesn't lose, he just waits longer for the right win. There's also something else the good guy carries that no one talks about. Guilt for feeling angry when he's treated unfairly, guilt for wanting to pull away, guilt for even questioning whether being kind is worth it anymore, because deep down he doesn't want to become someone he wouldn't recognize. So instead of expressing that frustration, he swallows it. He tells himself to be patient, to be understanding, to give people the benefit of the doubt, even when they've shown him who they are multiple times. And that self-control, that restraint, it takes more strength than most people will ever realize, but it comes at a cost. He starts to feel invisible, like his effort only matters when it's convenient for someone else, like his loyalty is expected, not appreciated. And the scariest part isn't that people take advantage of him, it's that he starts expecting it. That's when the good guy begins to question his worth. Not in a dramatic way, quietly, internally. He wonders if he needs to be colder to be respected, louder to be noticed, less caring to be chosen. And even though he doesn't like those thoughts, they creep in anyway. But here's the truth he needs to hear. The world doesn't need more detached people pretending they don't care. It needs more people who choose kindness, even when it's inconvenient. More people who know how to love without manipulation. More people who stay solid when everything around them feels fake. The good guy isn't weak for feeling deeply. He's strong for not letting pain turn him into something he's not. And one day that integrity will matter more than all the times he was overlooked. At some point, the good guy has to learn a hard lesson. Being kind doesn't mean being available to everyone. Being loyal doesn't mean tolerating disrespect. And having a good heart doesn't mean you owe it to people who keep proving they don't know how to handle it. This is usually the stage where he starts choosing himself. Not in a selfish way, not in a bitter way, but in a quiet, self-respecting way. He stops chasing people who only reach out when it's convenient. He stops over-explaining his intentions. He stops proving that he's different. Because the truth is, the right people don't need convincing. The good guy learns that boundaries aren't walls, they're filters. They don't block love, they block misuse. And once he understands that, everything changes. He becomes more selective with his energy, more intentional with who gets access to him. He still cares deeply, but now it's earned. This is where his strength really shows. He doesn't become cruel, he doesn't become cold, he just becomes aware. He learns that love shouldn't feel like constantly waiting your turn, that effort shouldn't feel one-sided, that if someone truly values you, they won't make you question where you stand. And when he finally meets someone who matches his energy, who sees his kindness as safety instead of weakness, it clicks. All the waiting, all the hurt, all the doubt, it suddenly makes sense. Because the good guy wasn't wrong for being good, he was just giving his heart to the wrong people. There's a moment where the good guy finally realized something important. He was never meant to be understood by everyone. His way of loving was never designed for people who thrive on attention, chaos, or option. It was meant for someone who values depth, consistency, and intention. And once that clicks, he stops feeling ashamed of who he is. He understands now that not everyone deserves access to his softness, that some people only know how to take, not receive. And that doesn't make him naive, it makes him discerning. He doesn't need to change his heart, he just needs to protect it better. The good guy learns how to walk away without guilt, not because he stopped caring, but because he started caring about himself too. He learns that choosing peace over potential isn't giving up, it's growth. That silence is sometimes the loudest form of self-respect, and slowly something shifts. He speaks clearer, stops apologizing for having standards. He no longer wonders if being a good guy is worth it. He knows it is, because even if the world tried to harden him, it didn't succeed. He stayed true, and that integrity, that's something no one can take from him. One day, someone will meet him where he is. They won't question his intention, they won't test his loyalty, they won't confuse kindness for weakness. They'll recognize it immediately, and they'll protect it the same way he does. Until then, the good guy keeps moving forward, not bitter, not broken, just wiser. And when that day comes, it won't feel dramatic. It won't feel like a movie moment where everything suddenly makes sense all at once. It'll feel calm, familiar, almost quiet, because the right person won't make the good guy question himself. They won't make him wonder if he's doing too much or not enough. They won't make him feel like he has to shrink his heart to be accepted. They'll meet him where he stands. They'll appreciate the way he listens, the way he shows up, the way he loves without keeping score. And for the first time, he won't feel like his kindness is a liability. It'll feel like a gift, something mutual, something protected, something finally returned. The good guy won't have to explain himself anymore. He won't have to prove that his intentions are real. He won't have to play it cool or pretend he doesn't care. He'll be allowed to be exactly who he is, and that'll be enough. Until then, the journey matters. Every disappointment taught him boundaries. Every heartbreak taught him discernment. Every moment of doubt sharpened his sense of self. He didn't lose those years being overlooked. He was being prepared to recognize real love when it shows up, prepared to walk away from anything that feels half-hearted, prepared to protect his heart without hardening. So if you're that good guy reading this, don't change. Don't let the world convince you that you need to become colder to survive. Stay solid, stay honest, stay kind. Just be selective with who gets that version of you. Because the world doesn't need fewer good guys. It needs people brave enough to stay good even when it's easier not to. What people never see is how much discipline it takes for the good guy to stay the way he is. Every bad experience tempts him to harden up. Every time he's overlooked, replaced, or taken for granted, there's a voice in his head telling him to stop caring so much, to move differently, to love less, to become like everyone else. But he does, not because it's easy, but because he knows who he is. He understands now that changing his character to fit a broken system would only cost him himself, and losing yourself just to be chosen by the wrong people is a price that's too high. So instead of becoming colder, he becomes more intentional. Instead of closing his heart, he narrows the door. He learns that being good doesn't mean being accessible to everyone. It means being principled. It means having the strength to say no, to walk away, to choose solitude over disrespect. And that kind of self-control, that's rare. The good guy also learns to forgive, not to excuse what hurt him, but to free himself from carrying resentment. He doesn't want bitterness living rent-free in his heart. He wants peace, growth, clarity, and forgiveness is part of that process. And one day, when someone finally meets him with the same depth, the same consistency, the same effort, he'll recognize it immediately. Not because it feels intense, but because it feels familiar. Until then, he keeps building, keeps healing, keeps choosing integrity over impulse, because the good guy isn't waiting to be saved. He's becoming someone worth meeting. In the end, the good guy doesn't get a dramatic apology from everyone who hurt him. He doesn't get closure from every situation that left scars. And he doesn't get a moment where the world suddenly admits it was wrong for overlooking him. What he gets is something quiet and far more powerful. He gets peace. Peace in knowing he never had to become someone else to survive. Peace in knowing his heart stayed intact even after everything. Peace in knowing he loved honestly in a world that often rewards the opposite. He looks back and realizes that every time he was ignored, every time he was treated like an option, every time he was underestimated, it wasn't a reflection of his worth. It was a reflection of who couldn't meet him where he stood. And that understanding changes everything, because now he doesn't crave validation. He doesn't chase attention. He doesn't beg to be chosen. He knows who he is. And when love finally finds him, the kind that's mutual, intentional, and steady, it won't feel like winning. It'll feel like alignment, like finally being understood without having to explain yourself, like being valued without having to prove. Until then, the good guy keeps walking forward, not bitter, not resentful, not hard, just grounded. And that's the kind of strength no one can take. I'll be gone one day. Not in a dramatic way, not as a threat, not as a goodbye, just as a fact. One day I won't be this accessible. I won't be this available. I won't be this version of me. And sometimes I wonder, will people notice? Will they realize what I carried, what I gave, what I stayed through? Or will it only make sense when I'm not around to do it anymore? It's strange feeling invisible while you're still here. You show up, you check in, you stay consistent, you carry conversations, you give effort, you hold things together quietly, but it feels expected, like your presence is normal, like your loyalty is assumed, like your effort is just background noise. And that's when the thought creeps in. If I stopped doing this, if I pulled back, if I disappeared, would anyone feel the shift? Or do people only realize what you meant after you're no longer there to give it? Being the strong one rarely gets applauded. You're the one people vent to, the one who keeps it together, the one who doesn't break down publicly. So they assume you're fine. They assume you don't need reassurance, don't need checking in, don't need to be chosen loudly, because you've trained everyone to see you as stable. But strength can be lonely, carrying everyone else's emotions while quietly managing your own, smiling through things you never fully process. And sometimes you think, if I ever stopped being the strong one, would anyone know how to hold me? Or would they only realize what I was carrying after I put it down? There's a quiet exhaustion that comes with always being dependable. You don't cancel, you don't disappear, you don't make people question where they stand with you. You're solid. And because of that, people get comfortable. They assume you'll always answer, always show up, always understand, but no one asks how much it costs you. No one sees the days you wanted to shut down, the moments you needed someone else to take the lead. Being reliable is a beautiful trait, but when it's constant, it becomes heavy, and sometimes you think, if I ever stop carrying this role, will they notice the weight I was holding all along? What happens when the dependable one finally pulls back? At first, nothing. People assume you're just busy, just tired, just having an off day. But when the consistency shifts, when the long paragraphs turn short, when the constant availability fades, that's when they feel it. The silence hits different when it's coming from the one who never used to go quiet. And suddenly they notice what you used to do, the way you checked in first, the way you kept things from falling apart, the way you made everything feel steady. And it's not about revenge, it's not about proving a point, it's about capacity, because even the strongest ones get tired of being unheld. And when they finally step back, it's not dramatic, it's quiet, but it changes everything. Being gone doesn't always mean physically leaving. Sometimes it means emotionally detaching. Still replying, but not overextending. Still present, but not pouring the same energy. Still there, but no longer carrying what isn't yours. That shift is subtle. You don't announce it, you don't explain it, you just stop overgiving. And the people who were used to your full capacity start to feel the difference, because now you're protecting your energy instead of offering it endlessly. You're choosing peace over being needed, and sometimes that's the real goodbye, not disappearing, just deciding you deserve to be poured into too. Being gone one day might not mean disappearing, it might mean evolving, becoming a version of yourself that not everyone gets access to anymore. The version that over-explains, that overextends, that tolerates bare minimum, gone. The version that accepts crumbs just to keep the peace, gone. Growth changes your availability. You don't respond the same, you don't tolerate the same, you don't give the same unlimited access, and some people will say you changed. They'll say you're distant, different, harder to reach, but what they really mean is you stopped being endlessly accessible, and sometimes being gone is just becoming too self-aware to stay in spaces that don't value you. The right people won't lose you when you grow, they won't complain that you changed, they'll adjust with you, because real connection isn't built on convenience, it's built on understanding. When you stop overgiving, the right ones won't call you distant. They'll ask if you're okay. When you set boundaries, the right ones won't feel attacked, they'll respect them. When you evolve, the right ones won't feel threatened, they'll evolve too. Growth doesn't push away what's aligned, it only exposes what was comfortable, and if one day you're gone because you chose peace over pressure, the people meant for you won't lose access. They'll meet you at your new level. One day, being gone might just mean I finally chose myself, not selfishly, not dramatically, fully choosing peace over pressure, fully choosing growth over familiarity, fully choosing reciprocity over exhaustion, because for a long time I chose understanding, I chose patience, I chose staying, even when it drained me. But one day I'll choose alignment, and that might look like distance to people who benefited from my overgiving. It might look like silence to people who only checked in when I carried things. But to me, it'll feel like relief, because being gone isn't always about leaving others. Sometimes it's about finally not leaving yourself. I'll be gone one day, but not in a tragic way, in a transformative way. I'll be gone from the spaces that drained me, gone from the roles that confined me, gone from the version of me that overgave just to be appreciated. And the people who only valued what I provided, well, they'll call it distance. The people who only noticed when I carried things, they'll call it change. But the ones who truly saw me, they'll understand. Because being gone isn't disappearing, it's evolution. It's choosing peace over performance, reciprocity over exhaustion, alignment over attachment. One day I'll be gone, and it won't be because I faded. It'll be because I finally grew into a version of myself that refuses to stay where I'm not valued. And that's not a loss. That's a rebirth. I don't think love works anymore. Not the way it used to. not the way we were told it would, because everything about it feels fragile now, disposable, temporary. I used to believe love was something you built and protected, something you chose every day, something that got stronger the more you worked through it. Now it feels like something people try on, like an outfit, like a phase, like something that lasts until it becomes inconvenient. And maybe that's just my experience talking. Maybe I'm jaded, maybe I'm tired, but it's hard not to feel this way when you've watched effort get ignored, loyalty get tested, and consistency get replaced with excitement. It feels like the people who care the most lose the fastest. The ones who communicate openly get labeled too much. The ones who stay calm get called boring. The ones who try to build something stable get overlooked for something unpredictable. And I don't understand when stability became unattractive. When did peace start feeling dull? When did consistency start feeling optional? When did love turn into a competition of who cares less? Because that's what it feels like now. Who replies slower? Who shows less emotion? Who keeps more options open? Who can detach quicker? It feels like the winner in modern love is the one who invests the least, and that doesn't make sense to me, because love was never supposed to be strategic. It was supposed to be mutual. It was supposed to feel safe. It was supposed to feel intentional. But now, it feels like leverage. It feels like power dynamics. It feels like emotional poker, and I'm tired of pretending that doesn't affect me. I don't want to play games. I don't want to pretend I don't care just to protect myself. I don't want to withhold affection just to maintain mystery. But every time I show up genuinely, it feels like I lose. And after enough losses, you start questioning the system, not yourself, the system. Because if doing things the right way keeps ending the wrong way, you start wondering if the rules changed, and maybe they did. Social media makes everyone feel replaceable. Dating apps make options endless. Attention is constant. Validation is everywhere, so commitment feels outdated. Why work through something uncomfortable when you can scroll into something new? Why communicate through confusion when you can ghost and reset? Why fix when you can replace? And I hate that mindset, but I see it everywhere. And after a while, it makes you wonder if love is even designed to last in this environment. If loyalty is rare, if depth is rare, if patience is rare. And when something is rare, it's harder to find. And when it's harder to find, you start feeling like maybe it doesn't work anymore. Not because love isn't real, but because people aren't built to sustain it. And that's the scariest thought, because I don't want to become cold. I don't want to stop believing, but I'm tired of investing in something that feels unstable. I'm tired of building just to watch it collapse. I'm tired of thinking something is solid just to realize it was temporary. And maybe love still works. Maybe it's just harder to find. Maybe it requires more maturity than most people are willing to bring. But right now, it feels broken. Not love itself, but the way we handle it. And I don't know if that's pessimism talking or experience. I think what makes me say, I don't think love works anymore isn't bitterness, it's exhaustion. Because every time I try to approach it the right way, intentional, honest, consistent, it feels like I'm bringing depth into a space that rewards detachment. And after a while, you start feeling like you're built wrong for this era. Like maybe you care too much. Like maybe you expect too much. Like maybe you still believe in something that everyone else quietly downgraded. It feels like effort used to mean something. Now effort feels risky. Because the more you give, the more exposed you are. And exposure in modern dating feels dangerous. The one who opens up first is vulnerable. The one who commits first is replaceable. The one who expresses feelings first is too invested. So people hold back. They ration affection. They ration honesty. They ration effort. And when both people are rationing, nothing fully forms. It becomes this half-built connection where nobody is fully in, just partially attached and partially guarded. And that's where love starts to feel like it doesn't work, because love requires surrender, not recklessness. Not obsession, but surrender. You have to be willing to be seen, willing to risk loss, willing to invest without guaranteed return. And nobody wants to do that anymore. Everyone wants certainty before commitment, proof before vulnerability, security before effort. But that's not how love works. Love is built in uncertainty, it's built in risk, it's built in choosing someone without knowing the full outcome. And we live in a time where uncertainty feels intolerable. We want options, we want backup, we want insurance. So instead of building depth with one person, we keep one foot out the door just in case. And you can't build something real with one foot already outside. That's why it feels broken. Not because love itself stopped working, but because we approach it defensively now. And I get it. People have been hurt, people have been betrayed, people have been replaced, so they protect themselves. But protection can slowly turn into detachment, and detachment kills depth. You can't love deeply if you're constantly calculating exits. You can't bond securely if you're scanning for upgrades. You can't build trust if you're always half preparing for collapse. And I'm tired of feeling like I have to adapt to that. I don't want to love strategically. I don't want to care less just to stay safe. I don't want to pretend I don't feel strongly just to avoid looking invested. But when you keep getting hurt for showing up fully, you start wondering if maybe the world rewards the opposite. And that's where the doubt creeps in. Maybe love doesn't work anymore because too many people are operating from fear instead of intention. Too many people want the feeling of love without the responsibility of it. They want butterflies but not boundaries, excitement but not effort, chemistry but not consistency, and chemistry fades without consistency. Excitement fades without stability. Butterflies disappear when there's no structure holding them, so relationships collapse, and instead of reflecting, people reset, and the cycle continues. And when you've seen that cycle enough times, it's hard not to feel like something fundamental shifted. Like the culture around love changed. Like commitment feels heavier now. Like loyalty feels optional. Like patience feels outdated. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there are still people who believe in depth. Maybe there are still people who value stability. Maybe there are still people who don't treat connection like it's disposable. But when your personal experiences keep showing the opposite, it's hard to stay optimistic. It's hard to believe love worked when everything around it feels temporary. And I don't want to lose faith, but I also don't want to keep pretending it's easy, because it's not anymore, and maybe love still works, but maybe it only works when two people are equally ready to stop playing defense, and that combination feels rare, not impossible, just rare. And rare takes patience, and patience feels hard when you've already invested so much of it before. So yeah, right now it feels broken. But maybe what's broken isn't love. Maybe it's how we've learned to approach it, and that might be fixable, but only if both people are willing to actually build instead of constantly preparing to leave. Maybe the real reason I don't think love works anymore is because it feels like timing is always off. You meet someone who seems aligned, you connect, you talk for hours, you feel understood, and then something small shifts. Not dramatic, not explosive, just subtle. They pull back slightly, energy changes, consistency drops, and instead of addressing it directly, things fade. That's what modern love feels like. Not endings, fading, no real closure, no real confrontation, just gradual detachment, and it leaves you questioning everything. Did I imagine the connection? Did I misread the depth? Did they ever feel it the way I did? Because when something ends without clarity, your mind fills in the blanks, and most of the time the blanks aren't kind. You start blaming yourself. Maybe I was too much, maybe I wasn't enough, maybe I moved too fast, maybe I didn't move fast enough, and that mental spiral gets exhausting. Love starts feeling like a puzzle with missing pieces. Like no matter how carefully you approach it, something unpredictable shifts. And maybe that unpredictability is what makes it feel broken, because love requires stability to grow. You can't build something meaningful on inconsistent ground. You can't plant something deep in unstable soil. And right now, everything feels unstable. People are distracted. attention spans are shorter. Validation is constant. It's hard to compete with instant dopamine because love isn't instant dopamine. It's slow burn, it's repetition, it's routine. It's choosing someone again and again, even when the excitement settles. And we live in a culture that constantly chases the next high. So once comfort replaces adrenaline, people confuse it with boredom. Once peace replaces intensity, people think something's missing. But peace isn't missing something. Peace is the goal. And maybe that's why love feels like it doesn't work anymore. Because people are chasing sparks instead of substance. They want fireworks every day, but fireworks aren't sustainable. They're loud, they're bright, they're temporary. Real love isn't fireworks, it's foundation, and foundations aren't flashy. They're steady, and steady doesn't trend well. Steady doesn't go viral, steady doesn't give you constant emotional spikes, but steady is what lasts. And maybe we forgot that. Maybe we've confused intensity with compatibility. Maybe we've confused excitement with alignment. Maybe we've confused attention with affection. And when those illusions fade, people assume love failed, but maybe love didn't fail, maybe expectations did. Still, it's hard not to feel tired, because every time you start believing in something new, you're also bracing for impact. You don't enter connections open anymore. You enter them cautiously, guarded, prepared, and that guarded energy changes everything, because love thrives in openness, and guarded hearts can't fully attach. So it becomes this cycle. People get hurt, they protect themselves, they enter something new with walls up. The connection never fully forms, it collapses. They say, see, love doesn't work. But maybe the walls are the problem. Maybe we're all trying to avoid pain so aggressively that we're also avoiding depth. And I don't know how to fix that, because I understand why people guard themselves. I do it too. After enough disappointment, you start building armor, but armor blocks connection just as much as it blocks harm. And that's the dilemma. How do you stay open in a world that keeps showing you how easy it is to be replaced? How do you trust when you've seen how quickly people move on? How do you believe in permanence when everything feels temporary? Those questions don't have easy answers. And that's why sometimes it feels easier to just say, love doesn't work anymore. Because admitting it feels broken, feels safer than admitting you're still hoping it does. And maybe that's the truth. Maybe I don't actually think love is broken. Maybe I'm just scared that I won't find someone who approaches it the way I do. Someone who values depth over dopamine, stability over sparks, consistency over chaos. Because if that kind of person still exists, then maybe love still works. It's just rare. And rare feels invisible when you've only experienced the opposite. So maybe love isn't broken. Maybe the way we approach it is. And maybe the real challenge isn't finding love. It's finding someone who isn't playing defense the whole time, because love can't work if both people are preparing for it to fail. It only works when both decide to build, not brace, and that's what I'm still trying to believe. I think what really makes me say love doesn't work anymore is how disposable everything feels. Nothing feels permanent. Not feelings, not promises, not even history. You can spend months building something with someone. Routines, memories, habits, inside jokes, and then one day it's like it never happened. They move on, they reset, they rebrand their life without you in it, and you're left sitting there wondering how something that felt so real could be treated so lightly. It makes you question whether permanence even exists anymore. Because love used to mean endurance. It used to mean working through discomfort. It used to mean fighting for connection when things got complicated. Now it feels like the moment things feel heavy, people exit. The moment conflict shows up, people reconsider. The moment effort is required consistently, people get tired, and I'm not saying everyone is like that. But it's common enough that it starts to feel normal, and when something unhealthy becomes normalized, you start adjusting your expectations, you start lowering standards without even realizing it. You start telling yourself, maybe this is just how it is now, maybe I'm expecting too much, maybe stability is unrealistic. And that's the dangerous part, because once you start believing depth is unrealistic, You start accepting less than you deserve. You start settling for half effort, half commitment, half presence, and half love never feels secure. It feels temporary. It feels like you're constantly on probation. Like you have to maintain value instead of simply being valued, and that's exhausting. Love shouldn't feel like an audition. It shouldn't feel like you're being evaluated weekly. It shouldn't feel like you're one mistake away from being replaced, but that's what modern dating culture does. It keeps everyone slightly disposable because there's always another option, and options change the psychology of commitment. Now, when people feel like there's endless supply, they don't invest deeply. They sample, they test, they compare, they upgrade, and depth requires focus. You can't build something meaningful if you're constantly scanning the horizon. And I'm tired of feeling like depth is rare, like loyalty is rare, like emotional maturity is rare. Because if those things are rare, then sustainable love becomes rare too. And when something becomes rare, it starts feeling mythical, like a concept instead of a reality. And I don't want love to feel mythical. I want it to feel grounded, attainable, real. But it's hard to believe in that when everything around you looks temporary. It's hard to stay optimistic when you've watched people replace long-term connections in weeks, when you've seen loyalty get overlooked for excitement, when you've seen communication get labeled as too intense. It makes you question if the qualities you value are even appreciated anymore. And I refuse to become colder just to survive in this environment, but sometimes I understand why people do. Because caring fully feels risky, showing up fully feels vulnerable, and vulnerability feels unsafe when you've seen how quickly people pivot. So instead of opening fully, people guard. Instead of committing deeply, people hesitate. Instead of building, people browse. And browsing never creates attachment, it creates distraction. So maybe love doesn't feel like it works anymore, because too many people are browsing instead of building. Too many people are entertaining instead of committing. Too many people are protecting themselves instead of participating fully. And when both people are slightly guarded, slightly detached, slightly prepared to leave, the connection never roots deeply, it stays surface level. And surface level love doesn't survive pressure. It collapses the moment something real tests it, and that collapse reinforces the belief, see, love doesn't work. But maybe love isn't failing, maybe it's just not being handled properly, maybe it requires two people who are equally tired of games, equally tired of ego, equally ready to stop scanning and start building. And that combination is rare, not impossible, just rare. And when something is rare, it takes time to find. But when you've already waited, already invested, already tried, it's hard not to feel discouraged. It's hard not to say, maybe this just doesn't work anymore. Because hope feels heavy when you've carried it through disappointment repeatedly. Still, there's a small part of me that refuses to fully give up, not because I haven't been hurt, but because I know what depth feels like, and I know I'm capable of giving it. So maybe love doesn't feel broken, maybe it just feels misaligned. Maybe I haven't met someone operating at the same level yet, and maybe love only doesn't work when one person is building and the other is browsing. And next time I won't settle for someone who's just browsing, because I'm done treating love like something experimental. I want something intentional, and if that's rare, then I'll wait, but I won't pretend that what's common right now feels functional, because it doesn't, and that's why sometimes it feels broken. Another reason I feel like love doesn't work anymore is because nobody seems patient enough for it. Real love is repetitive. It's waking up and choosing the same person on regular days, not just exciting ones. It's having conversations that aren't aesthetic. It's working through misunderstandings. It's sitting in awkward silence sometimes. It's resolving conflict instead of avoiding it. And patience feels rare now. The moment something feels complicated, people start questioning compatibility instead of questioning their communication. The moment effort feels required, people start asking if there's someone easier. The moment discomfort shows up, people confuse it with wrong person. But discomfort isn't always misalignment. Sometimes it's growth. Sometimes it's two different perspectives trying to learn each other. And learning takes time, but time feels expensive in a world where attention is cheap. It's easier to restart with someone new than it is to repair with someone familiar. It's easier to chase a fresh high than maintain steady connection. It's easier to scroll than sit, and when everything around you reinforces immediacy, patience feels outdated. But love has never been immediate. It starts fast sometimes, and sure, but it sustains slowly, and sustainability isn't exciting. It's disciplined, it's structured, it's built. And I think a lot of people want the feeling of falling in love, but not the responsibility of staying in love. Falling is automatic. Staying is intentional. Falling feels magical. Staying feels deliberate, and deliberate takes effort, and effort feels optional now. That's what makes it feel broken. Because if two people aren't equally patient, equally committed to working through friction, the relationship never stabilizes. It stays fragile, and fragile things shatter easily. Then everyone says, see, it didn't work, but maybe it didn't work because it was never given time to become strong. You can't plant something and expect it to grow overnight, but people expect emotional security immediately. They expect certainty quickly. They expect perfection early. And when reality shows flaws, they exit instead of adjusting. And after experiencing that enough times, you start questioning whether anyone actually stays long enough to build something durable. It's exhausting to be the only one willing to sit in discomfort and talk it through. It's exhausting to be the only one committed to fixing instead of fleeing. It's exhausting to feel like you're building while the other person is evaluating, and evaluation kills intimacy. Because if someone is constantly assessing whether you're worth it, they're never fully in. They're half invested, half prepared to leave. And love doesn't grow in half investment, it grows in commitment. So maybe love doesn't feel broken, maybe commitment does, maybe patience does, maybe resilience does, because real love requires all three, and without them it collapses under the weight of normal human imperfection, and humans are imperfect, always, which means love will always require forgiveness, always require communication, always require choosing someone even when it's not convenient, and if people aren't willing to do that consistently, then yeah, it starts to feel like love doesn't work anymore because nobody is sustaining it long enough to see it mature. And maturity is where love actually becomes powerful, not in the butterflies, not in the early intensity, but in the stability that comes after. And maybe we're just living in a time that glorifies the beginning but undervalues the maintenance, and maintenance isn't sexy, but it's essential. And I'm not ready to say love is dead, but I am ready to admit that patience feels endangered, and without patience, nothing lasting survives. Maybe love doesn't feel like it works anymore because nobody trusts it. Not fully, not without hesitation. Everyone says they want something real, but when something real starts forming, fear shows up faster than commitment. Fear of being replaced, fear of being cheated on, fear of being the one who cares more, fear of looking stupid. So instead of leaning in, people brace. They stay slightly detached. They keep backup options emotionally. They don't say everything they feel. They don't invest fully. And when two people are both protecting themselves at the same time, nothing deep ever roots. It becomes this cautious connection where both are waiting for the other to prove something first. Show me you won't leave. Show me you're serious. Show me I'm safe. But safety doesn't come from interrogation. It comes from participation. And participation requires risk. That's the part that feels lost now. Nobody wants to risk looking foolish for love, but love has always required that. You have to be willing to look foolish, to say I care first, to show up consistently even when you don't know the outcome, to invest without a guarantee, and guarantees don't exist. So instead of risking vulnerability, people risk nothing. They test, they observe, they calculate, they delay emotional investment until it feels secure. But emotional security doesn't grow from calculation. It grows from consistency, and consistency requires trust, and trust requires vulnerability. It's a cycle, and when one part is missing, the whole structure collapses. So maybe love feels broken because too many people are trying to feel safe before they've actually built anything safe. They want certainty before commitment, but certainty is something you earn together, not something you demand up front. And I get it. Nobody wants to be hurt again. Nobody wants to feel like the fool who cared more. Nobody wants to invest months just to be replaced in weeks. But if both people are guarding themselves at all times, love never gets a chance to breathe. It suffocates under suspicion, it weakens under ego, it dissolves under comparison, and comparison is everywhere now. We compare partners to people online, we compare relationships to curated timelines, we compare our connection to someone else's highlight reel, and comparison erodes gratitude. It makes you focus on what's missing instead of what's present, and when gratitude fades, dissatisfaction grows, and dissatisfaction looks for alternatives, and alternatives are always available now, so commitment feels heavier than ever, because staying means choosing one thing in a world full of options, and that feels scary to people who haven't learned how to be content. And that's another part of why it feels like love doesn't work, because contentment is rare, and without contentment, nothing feels enough. Not the effort, not the loyalty, not the stability. There's always a what if, and what if is poison to commitment. What if there's someone better? What if I'm settling? What if this isn't the highest version of love? But love isn't about maximizing, it's about choosing. And choice requires focus, and focus requires discipline. And discipline isn't romanticized anymore. Excitement is, intensity is, instant chemistry is. But chemistry alone can't sustain anything. It ignites, it doesn't stabilize, and maybe that's why love feels like it fails. Because people confuse ignition with foundation. They fall fast, they burn bright, they collapse quickly. And then they say, see? Love doesn't work. But maybe what didn't work was patience. Maybe what didn't work was emotional maturity. Maybe what didn't work was two people being equally willing to commit without constantly scanning for something better. I don't think love stopped working. I think standards changed. I think attention got divided. I think ego got louder. And I think fear got stronger. And fear makes people protect themselves in ways that sabotage the very thing they want. So when I say I don't think love works anymore, maybe what I really mean is I don't see enough people willing to handle it properly, because love is simple. People complicate it. Love is consistent. People are inconsistent. Love is intentional. People are distracted. And until two people show up ready to be disciplined about connection, not just excited about it, it's going to keep feeling unstable. And that's exhausting, because I don't want to approach love like a risk assessment. I want to approach it like a build. But building requires two architects, not one builder and one evaluator. And maybe that's the real challenge, not finding love, but finding someone who isn't quietly preparing for it to fail. Because love only doesn't work when someone stops working at it. And too many people stop the moment it requires effort instead of adrenaline. And I'm tired of adrenaline. I want foundation. And until I find someone who wants foundation too, yeah, it's gonna feel broken. Another reason it feels like love doesn't work anymore is because people are addicted to potential more than presence. They fall in love with what something could be instead of what it actually is. They fall for the idea, the fantasy, the imagined future. But when reality sets in, flaws, habits, differences, instead of adjusting expectations, they downgrade the connection. It's like people want perfection in a human body, and humans aren't perfect. So the moment imperfection shows up, doubt follows. She could be better. He could be more. This might not be the best I can get. And that mindset destroys contentment. Because if you're always wondering if something better exists, You'll never water what's in front of you. You'll keep browsing instead of building. And browsing doesn't create depth, it creates comparison, and comparison slowly poisons appreciation. You stop seeing what someone does for you. You focus on what they don't. You stop valuing consistency. You crave excitement, and excitement is unstable. Love isn't built on constant excitement. It's built on reliability, and reliability feels boring if you're addicted to adrenaline. That's the uncomfortable truth. Some people don't want peace, they want chaos that feels passionate. They want intensity that feels cinematic. They want love to look like a movie, dramatic, emotional, unpredictable, but real love is structured, it's routine, it's sometimes quiet, and quiet doesn't trend, quiet doesn't feel thrilling, but quiet is secure. And security is rare in a world that rewards unpredictability. So when someone gives you stability, it feels unfamiliar, and unfamiliar feels uncomfortable, and uncomfortable gets labeled as not right, so they leave, and then they chase something that feels intense again, and that cycle repeats, and every time it collapses, they say, love just doesn't work for me. But maybe it's not love that's failing, maybe it's expectations, maybe it's the craving for perfection, maybe it's the refusal to accept that long-term connection requires compromise and discipline, because compromise doesn't mean settling, it means adjusting, it means understanding that no person will check every box, it means valuing depth over dopamine. And dopamine fades, depth stays, but depth requires maturity. And maturity isn't loud, it's subtle, it's calm, it's secure enough to not constantly question whether something better exists. And that kind of security feels rare right now. It feels like people want love to feel good every second, but no connection feels good every second. There are misunderstandings, bad days, moments of frustration, and if someone expects constant emotional highs, they'll leave the moment it feels neutral. And neutral isn't bad. Neutral is stable, but stability doesn't give you butterflies, it gives you peace, and peace feels unfamiliar in a culture addicted to stimulation. So yeah, sometimes it feels like love doesn't work anymore because people don't recognize it. When it's calm, they mistake chaos for chemistry. They mistake unpredictability for passion, they mistake anxiety for attraction, and healthy love doesn't feel anxious, it feels steady. But if someone's nervous system is used to chaos, steady feels boring, and boring feels wrong, so they leave something stable for something intense. And intensity fades, and the cycle repeats, and that repetition creates the illusion that love is broken. But maybe what's broken is the way people define it. Maybe love hasn't changed, maybe we have, maybe we expect too much fantasy and not enough responsibility. Maybe we want effortless depth, but depth is never effortless. It's built, maintained, protected, and protection requires discipline, and discipline isn't romanticized anymore. But without it, nothing lasts. Well, maybe love still works, but only for people who understand that it's not supposed to feel like fireworks forever. It's supposed to feel like foundation. And foundation doesn't crumble at the first sign of imperfection. It strengthens when both people decide to reinforce it. And that's the part that feels rare. Not love, but two people equally ready to treat it like something sacred instead of something optional. And until that alignment happens, yeah, it's gonna keep feeling broken. And sometimes I wonder if the reason love feels broken is because people are more afraid of vulnerability than they are of loneliness. Loneliness is uncomfortable, but vulnerability feels dangerous. Loneliness just feels empty. Vulnerability feels exposing. And exposing yourself in a world where people can replace you in days feels reckless. So instead of risking being fully seen, people present edited versions of themselves, curated personalities, controlled emotions, measured effort. And when two curated versions try to connect, the connection stays surface level, because depth only forms when masks come off. And masks are safer. Masks protect ego. Masks protect pride. Masks protect image, but masks also block intimacy, and intimacy is what makes love feel alive. Without intimacy, you're just sharing space, and shared space isn't the same as shared depth. Maybe love feels broken because nobody wants to be the first one to remove the armor. Nobody wants to be the one who says, I care, without knowing if it'll be reciprocated. Nobody wants to look foolish, but love has always required risk, and if risk tolerance is low, depth tolerance is low too, and low depth means fragile connection, and fragile connection collapses under normal human imperfection. Then everyone says, see, it didn't work, but maybe it never had the chance to, because it was protected too heavily. You can't build something strong if both people are guarding themselves more than they're investing. And that guarding energy feels everywhere now. It feels like people are in relationships half committed, half prepared to exit, always scanning, always evaluating, always calculating, and calculation kills spontaneity. It kills surrender. It kills the soft parts of love, because soft parts require trust, and trust requires time, and time requires patience, and patience feels scarce. So people rush into feelings but hesitate into commitment. They want intensity without obligation, connection without responsibility, attention without accountability, and that imbalance makes everything unstable, because love isn't just emotion. It's discipline, it's consistency when things feel normal, it's showing up when excitement fades, and showing up isn't glamorous, but it's powerful, and maybe we forgot that. Maybe we've glamorized beginnings and neglected maintenance, maybe we've romanticized sparks and ignored structure, and when structure isn't present, collapse feels inevitable, so love starts to feel broken, not because it doesn't exist, but because it isn't being handled with care, and care requires emotional maturity, and emotional maturity isn't common, it's developed, and development requires self-awareness, and self-awareness requires reflection. And reflection requires sitting with discomfort, and a lot of people avoid discomfort at all costs. So instead of reflecting, they replace. Instead of adjusting, they exit. Instead of building, they restart. And restarting feels easier than repairing. But restarting resets the lesson too, and the cycle continues. And after watching enough cycles, it's hard not to feel like love is just temporary. Like everything eventually fades, like no one really stays. But maybe the problem isn't love, maybe it's our attention spans, maybe it's our tolerance for imperfection, maybe it's our fear of being fully seen, and maybe love only works when two people are brave enough to risk looking foolish for it, brave enough to commit without constant comparison, brave enough to stay when it's not cinematic, brave enough to build when it's not exciting. And that kind of bravery feels rare, but rare doesn't mean non-existent, it just means selective. And maybe the reason love feels broken to me is because I've seen too much avoidance and not enough bravery. But that doesn't mean bravery doesn't exist, it just means I haven't experienced it consistently yet. And that's frustrating, but frustration doesn't equal impossibility. It just means the standard is high, and high standards take time to align with. So maybe love isn't broken, maybe it's just misused, and until two people approach it with equal discipline and equal depth, it's going to keep feeling unstable. But I still believe, even if it's quiet belief now, that real love requires courage, and courage isn't loud, it's consistent. And when I find someone consistent enough to stay through discomfort instead of running from it, maybe it won't feel broken anymore. Maybe it'll finally feel built. There's another truth I don't always say out loud. Sometimes when I say I don't think love works anymore, what I really mean is I'm scared to believe in it again. Because believing in it requires hope, and hope is heavy when you've watched things fall apart more than once. It's easier to say love is broken than to admit you're afraid of being hurt again. It's easier to act detached than to admit you still want something real. It's easier to lower expectations than to risk disappointment. But the reason it still frustrates me so much is because I do believe in depth, I believe in loyalty, I believe in consistency, I believe in choosing someone and actually staying. So when I look around and see temporary everywhere, it feels like I'm out of place, like I'm built for something that isn't common anymore, and that can make you feel isolated. Because you start wondering if you're unrealistic, if you expect too much, if maybe you're the one who needs to adapt. But adapting to a culture that treats connection lightly feels like losing something essential, and I don't want to lose that. I don't want to become someone who loves halfway. I don't want to become someone who keeps emotional backups. I don't want to become someone who leaves at the first sign of discomfort. But when you keep getting hurt for caring deeply, you start questioning if depth is sustainable. You start questioning if maybe emotional availability is a liability. And that's where it starts to feel broken, because when emotional maturity feels like a disadvantage, something is misaligned. If being honest gets you labeled as too intense, if being consistent gets you labeled as too predictable, if being loyal gets you taken for granted, then it feels like the traits that build love aren't valued anymore, and that's exhausting. Because I don't want to play a game where detachment wins. I don't want to pretend I don't care just to maintain power. I don't want to approach relationships strategically. I want to approach them intentionally. And intentional love requires two people who are equally committed to depth, not one person building and one person browsing, not one person healing and one person distracting, not one person fighting and one person evaluating, two people building together. And maybe that's why it feels broken, because alignment like that feels rare, not because it doesn't exist, but because it requires both people to be self-aware enough to recognize what they're building. And self-awareness takes work, and not everyone does the work. But here's something I'm slowly realizing. Just because I haven't experienced that alignment consistently doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means I haven't found someone operating at the same emotional frequency yet. And maybe love doesn't feel like it works because I've been encountering people who are still figuring themselves out, still healing, still exploring, still distracted, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if two people aren't equally ready, love will always feel unstable. So maybe love isn't broken, maybe timing is, maybe readiness is, maybe emotional maturity is, and that's a different problem than love itself. Because love, real love, still requires the same ingredients it always has. Trust, patience, consistency, effort, communication, choice. Those haven't changed. What's changed is how many people are willing to commit to them long term. And that's what makes it feel fragile, but fragile doesn't mean impossible. It just means selective. And maybe the reason it feels broken is because I haven't experienced the selectivity paying off yet. So do I really think love doesn't work anymore? Or am I just tired? Tired of building with people who weren't ready? Tired of investing in connections that weren't aligned? Tired of watching things collapse because one person stopped trying? Maybe what feels broken isn't love. Maybe it's my optimism. Maybe it's my patience. Maybe it's my energy. Because loving deeply takes energy. Believing in something lasting takes courage. And after enough disappointment, courage feels heavy. But here's what I know. I don't want temporary. I don't want half effort. I don't want something that collapses the moment it feels normal. I want stability, I want intentionality, I want someone who doesn't get bored when peace replaces intensity. And if that's rare, then I'll accept that it's rare, but I won't accept that it's impossible because I know I exist. And if I exist, someone who still believes in depth and loyalty and consistency, then that means other people like that exist too. Maybe love doesn't feel like it works because it's not common anymore. But uncommon doesn't mean extinct. It just means it requires discernment. It requires patience. It requires walking away from people who treat connection casually. And maybe that's the real shift. Maybe love doesn't work when we try to force it with the wrong people. Maybe it only works when both people are equally disciplined about it, and discipline isn't flashy, but it's powerful. So maybe love isn't broken, maybe it's just rare enough that you have to be selective about who you build it with, and until that alignment shows up, it's going to feel unstable. But I refuse to become cold just because it's hard. I refuse to downgrade my depth just because others operate shallow. And one day, when two people who both believe in building, not browsing, meet each other, love won't feel broken, it'll feel intentional. And intentional love, that still works. There's a point where saying love doesn't work anymore becomes less about love and more about self-protection, because if I convince myself it's broken, then I don't have to risk it again. If I label it dysfunctional, I don't have to open up. If I tell myself everyone leaves, then no one can surprise me when they do. It becomes armor. And armor feels safer than hope. Hope requires vulnerability. Hope requires believing someone will show up differently than the last person did. Hope requires trusting that the next connection won't collapse the same way the others did. And that's hard, because patterns create expectations. If you've seen inconsistency enough times, you start expecting it. If you've been replaced quickly, you start bracing for it. If you've watched effort go unmatched, you start rationing yours. And slowly, without even noticing, you stop loving the way you used to. You become careful, measured, guarded. You don't say everything you feel. You don't invest as quickly. You don't attach as deeply. And then when something ends, it hurts less, but it also meant less. And that's the trade-off nobody talks about. If you protect yourself enough, you reduce pain, but you also reduce depth. And depth is the whole point, so maybe love doesn't feel like it works anymore because I've been loving defensively. Not fully, not recklessly, but cautiously. And cautious love never fully blooms. It survives. It doesn't flourish. And surviving isn't the same as thriving. Maybe I'm not doubting love. Maybe I'm doubting whether I can afford to feel that deeply again. Because feeling deeply means risking loss deeply. And loss has weight. And carrying that weight repeatedly makes you tired. But here's the uncomfortable truth. If I stop believing in love because others mishandled it, then I let their behavior reshape my character. And I don't want that. I don't want to become someone who loves halfway. I don't want to operate from fear. I don't want to treat every new person like they're already guilty of someone else's mistakes. But healing doesn't happen instantly. Trust doesn't reset overnight. And rebuilding optimism takes time, so maybe love isn't broken. Maybe I'm just rebuilding my trust in it. Maybe what feels like cynicism is actually exhaustion. Maybe what feels like disbelief is actually disappointment that hasn't fully healed, because when I'm honest with myself, I still want depth. I still want consistency. I still want something stable and intentional. If I truly believed love didn't work anymore, I wouldn't still crave it. I wouldn't still think about it. I wouldn't still care this much. The fact that I'm frustrated proves I still believe in it. You don't get frustrated over something you've given up on. You get frustrated over something you still want, but haven't found. And maybe that's the shift. Maybe love isn't broken. Maybe my patience is just being tested. Maybe my standards are filtering out what doesn't align. Maybe every failed connection isn't proof that love doesn't work. Maybe it's proof that misalignment doesn't. And misalignment is common, but alignment is rare. And rare things take time to find. So maybe I need to stop saying love is broken. Maybe I need to say love is selective. Maybe I haven't experienced the right version of it yet. Because the version I want, stable, mutual, disciplined, requires two people equally committed to depth. And depth isn't everywhere. But it exists, I exist, which means someone else like me exists too. And maybe love doesn't feel like it works because I've been encountering people at different stages of emotional maturity, different levels of readiness, different levels of self-awareness, and that doesn't mean love is dead. It just means timing matters, and readiness matters, and alignment matters. So yeah, some days it feels broken, some days it feels like effort goes nowhere. Some days it feels like loyalty isn't valued, but deep down, I don't think love stopped working. I think I'm just tired of building with people who weren't built to stay. And that's different, because when two people are both ready, not just interested, not just attracted, but ready, love doesn't collapse easily. It stabilizes, it deepens, it roots. So maybe love isn't broken. Maybe it just requires the right two people at the right time. And until that alignment shows up, it's going to feel unstable. But I'm not done believing in it. I'm just more careful about who I build it with. And that's growth, not defeat. I really did love her. Not just in the beginning. Not just when it was easy. I loved her in the quiet moments, in the normal days, in the in-between. I loved the way she thought, the way she explained things, the way she cared too deeply sometimes. And that's what makes this harder, because it would be easier if I didn't love her, if it was fake, if it was surface level, if it was just attachment, but it wasn't. I loved her, and somehow that still wasn't enough. Love and compatibility aren't always the same thing. That's the part nobody prepares you for. You can love someone deeply and still not align long term. I loved her heart, her mind, her energy, but we handled conflict differently. We needed reassurance differently. We showed up differently under pressure. And love doesn't erase that. It doesn't magically fix timing issues, communication gaps, emotional readiness. You can love someone and still slowly grow apart. You can love someone and still realize you're not building in the same direction. And that doesn't make the love fake, it just makes it human. Loving someone doesn't automatically mean you knew how to love them properly, and that's a hard truth. I loved her the best way I knew how, but sometimes the best I knew wasn't what she needed. She needed reassurance. I gave independence. She needed consistency. I gave effort in waves. She needed clarity. I gave feelings, but not always direction. And that doesn't mean I didn't care. It just means love without emotional maturity can still fall short. I thought loving her was enough, but love isn't just what you feel, it's what you show, what you maintain, what you're disciplined enough to protect. And sometimes you realize you loved someone deeply, but you hadn't learned yet how to love them well. Regret hits different when you know you tried, because it's not like I didn't care. I showed up, I put in effort, I stayed longer than I had before. But effort in the wrong areas doesn't always translate. I tried to fix problems instead of understanding them. I tried to be strong instead of being vulnerable. I tried to prove I loved her instead of learning how she needed to feel it. And that's the painful part. Knowing you weren't careless, just unaware. Regret isn't always about not loving someone. Sometimes it's about realizing you could have loved them better. And by the time you understand that, it's already over. You don't always realize someone's full value while they're still there. Sometimes you notice it in their absence, in the silence where their voice used to be, in the space where their presence felt normal, in the little things no one else does quite the same. The way she checked on me without making it obvious, the way she remembered details I forgot I even shared, the way she stayed patient when I was difficult. When you're used to someone loving you, you can mistake it for something ordinary. But once it's gone, you see how intentional it was. She wasn't too much. She wasn't overthinking. She wasn't needy. She was invested. And I didn't fully understand how rare that was until I felt the difference. Missing someone doesn't automatically mean you should go back. That's the confusing part. Because loneliness can sound like love. Silence can romanticize memories. Distance can soften the hard parts. I miss her laugh, her presence, the way she cared. But I also have to remember why it ended, the miscommunication, the emotional gaps, the moments we both felt unseen. Love alone isn't always enough to rebuild something, because going back requires more than feelings. It requires change, growth, accountability, consistency you didn't have before. And if I can't honestly say, I've grown into someone who can love her better, then missing her isn't a reason to reopen the door. Sometimes you can love someone deeply and still let them go with respect. Loving her changed me, not in a dramatic way, in a quiet, permanent way. She made me more aware, more reflective, more honest with myself. I can't love casually anymore. I can't ignore emotional gaps. I can't pretend effort doesn't matter, because I've seen what real investment looks like. And once you experience that, your standards shift. You stop entertaining half effort. You stop confusing attention with intention. You stop thinking bare minimum is enough. She didn't just teach me how to love. She showed me how I need to be loved. And even though it didn't last, it wasn't meaningless. Some people aren't meant to stay forever. They're meant to upgrade you. Loving her set a new standard. And that's something I can't undo. I can't go back to surface level conversations. I can't go back to inconsistent effort. I can't go back to love that feels half present, because I've felt what depth feels like. I've felt what it's like to be understood without over-explaining, to be cared for without asking twice, to be chosen without confusion. And once you experience that, you can't pretend it doesn't matter. It ruined average for me. Not in a bitter way, in a mature way. Now I know what intentional love looks like. Now I know what emotional safety feels like. Now I know what real effort is, and I won't lower that standard just because I miss her. Loving her made me more careful, but not closed off, more intentional. I don't rush feelings anymore. I don't say I love you just because it feels right in the moment. I don't assume connection automatically means compatibility. I pay attention now to effort, to consistency, to whether we're building or just vibing. Because when you've loved someone deeply and lost them, you understand the weight of it. Love isn't casual to me anymore. It's responsibility, it's discipline. It's showing up even when it's inconvenient. And maybe that's the real proof that I loved her. She didn't make me bitter, she made me intentional. Was loving her worth it? Even though it ended? Yeah. Because not all love is meant to last forever. Some love is meant to teach you who you are, who you're not, who you're becoming. I loved her, and even though we didn't make it, that love wasn't wasted. It showed me my gaps. It exposed my immaturity. It forced me to grow. It raised my standards. It deepened my emotional awareness. It changed how I show up now, and that matters, because one day when I love someone again, I'll love clearer, stronger, more consistently, not because I forgot her, but because loving her made me better. So yeah, it hurt, it ended, but I really did love her, and that will always mean something. I saw her with him, the same guy she told me not to worry about, and in that moment, everything made sense, not slowly, not over time, instantly. Because all those times I felt something was off, all those moments I told myself I was overthinking, all those gut feelings I tried to ignore, they weren't wrong. I just didn't want them to be true. At first I just stood there, not reacting, not moving, because there's something about seeing it with your own eyes that hits different than just thinking about it. It's not a guess anymore, it's not a feeling, it's real. And in that moment, everything I tried to deny became clear. I remembered every time she said, "He's just a friend. You don't have to worry about him. It's nothing like that." And I believed her, not because I was naive, but because I trusted her. And that's what made it hurt more. Not just seeing them together, but realizing I defended something that was already falling apart. All those moments where my gut told me something was off, I ignored them because I didn't want to be that guy, the one who overthinks, the one who questions everything, the one who doesn't trust. So I stayed calm, stayed understanding, stayed loyal, while she was slowly giving that energy to someone else. And seeing them together, it wasn't even what they were doing, it was how it looked. Comfortable, natural, like something that didn't just start, like something that had been building while I was still trying to hold on to what we had. That's when it really hit me. I wasn't replaced overnight. I was replaced slowly, quietly, while I was still there. And that realization hurts in a different way, because it makes you feel like you were the only one still in it, while she was already somewhere else. For a second I wanted to confront her, ask questions, get answers, but then I realized something. I already had my answer right in front of me. No explanation could change what I just saw. And the truth is, it wasn't even about him. It was about what she chose. Because anyone can come into someone's life, but it takes a decision to give them the space that used to be yours. And she made that decision without saying it. That moment closed something in me, not out of anger, not out of hate, just clarity, because now there was nothing left to question, nothing left to figure out. Everything I needed to understand, I was right there. I saw her with the guy she told me not to worry about, and yeah, that hurt. But it also did something else. It removed the last bit of doubt I had, because now I know this for sure. When something feels off, it usually is, and next time, I won't ignore that feeling just to keep something going, because the truth will always show itself, eventually. I didn't walk into this guarded, I didn't play games, I didn't keep one foot out the door. I trusted you. I trusted your words. I trusted the way you looked at me like I was safe. I trusted the version of you showed me when it was just us. That's what hurts the most. Not that you left, but that you let me believe you wouldn't. I opened up in ways I don't do often. I told you things I never say out loud. I let myself feel comfortable being soft around you, and you watched me do that. You knew how much it meant. You knew how careful I was with my heart, and you still broke it. Not all at once, not dramatically, slowly. You pulled back without explanation. You changed without warning. You stopped choosing me, but kept me close enough to not fully let go. And I stayed longer than I should have because I believed in the version of you I first met. That's on me. I ignored the signs. I excused the distance. I told myself you were just overwhelmed, just busy, just figuring things out. But the truth is, you were figuring out life without me, and I was still holding space for you, like you were coming back. What really broke me wasn't losing you. It was realizing I trusted someone who didn't protect my heart the way I protected theirs. You didn't just hurt me, you changed how I trust. Now I question things I never used to. I hesitate where I used to be open. I hold back where I used to give freely, not because I'm bitter, but because I learned the hard way that not everyone deserves access to me. I don't regret loving you. I regret trusting you with something you weren't ready to hold, and that's the part I'm still healing from. Not the heartbreak, but the betrayal of believing you were different. What messed me up the most was how easy it was for you, how easily you switched up, how quickly I became optional, how natural it felt for you to move on like nothing happened. Meanwhile, I was still trying to understand when things changed. I kept replaying conversations, looking for the moment where I messed it up, where I said too much, where I trusted too fast, because that's what you do when someone breaks your heart quietly. You don't get closure, you get questions. And the hardest one is always the same. How could you do this after everything I trusted you with? You knew my past. You knew how careful I was. You knew how long it took me to open up again. And instead of protecting that, you treated it like something temporary. Like something you could step into and walk away from without consequences. I wasn't perfect, but I was honest. I didn't hide how I felt. I didn't pretend. I didn't keep you guessing. And that's why it hurt deeper. Because I didn't lose you to dishonesty. I lost you to indifference, to the realization that I mattered more to myself than I ever did to you. And that's a hard thing to swallow when you trusted someone with your heart. After you broke my heart, it didn't just hurt, it rewired me. I didn't notice it right away. At first it was just silence, just heaviness, just missing you more than I wanted to admit. But then it showed up in how I loved. I stopped being as open, stopped saying things the moment I felt them, stopped assuming good intentions, not because I wanted to, but because trust didn't feel safe anymore. Before you, I believed if I was honest, I'd be met with honesty. If I was loyal, I'd be protected. If I trusted someone, they'd respect that. You broke that belief. Now every connection comes with hesitation. Every feeling comes with a pause. Every time someone gets close, a part of me wonders how long before they leave too. And that's the part that hurts quietly. You didn't just walk away. You made me doubt the version of myself that loved without fear. I catch myself holding back even when I don't want to. I catch myself preparing for loss before anything even begins, because trusting you taught me how much it costs when it goes wrong, and I hate that. I hate that your actions made softness feel like a liability. that honesty now feels risky, that love feels like something I have to guard instead of give. I'm not colder, I'm not heartless, I'm just more careful with a heart you proved can be broken even when it's given genuinely, and that's something I'm still learning how to undo. The anger didn't come right away. At first I blamed myself for trusting too fast, or believing too much, or not seeing it sooner. But anger shows up when the fog finally clears, when you realize you didn't ask for too much, you just asked the wrong person. I wasn't wrong for trusting you. I wasn't weak for opening up. I wasn't naive for believing your words. You just didn't deserve the level of honesty I gave you. And that truth stings, because it means the pain wasn't a lesson about loving better. It was a lesson about choosing better. You knew what you were doing. You knew how much I cared. You knew how much trust cost me. And you still chose yourself without considering the damage. That's where the anger lives, not in hatred, but in clarity, in the realization that I gave real effort to someone who treated it casually, that I showed up while you slowly checked out, that I protected your feelings while you ignored mine, and I don't hate you for leaving. I'm angry because you stayed long enough to earn my trust and left like it never mattered. That kind of hurt doesn't make you loud, it makes you precise. It teaches you that love without accountability isn't love at all. And from that point on, I stopped questioning my worth and started questioning why I ever doubted it. At some point, I stopped waiting for closure from you. Not because I got answers, but because I realized I wasn't going to. You never explained yourself, never owned the hurt, never acknowledged what it cost me to trust you, and for a while that ate at me. I wanted you to see it, to understand what you broke, to say something that made it make sense. But silence was the answer, not the one I wanted, the one I needed, because it showed me that the kind of closure I was looking for was never coming from you. So I had to give it to myself. I had to accept that some people don't leave loudly. They leave by slowly caring less and letting you figure it out alone. I had to accept that trusting you wasn't the mistake, expecting accountability from you was, and that acceptance was heavier than anger ever was, because it meant letting go without resolution, without apologies, without the comfort of being understood, just truth, the truth that I loved honestly, the truth that I trusted genuinely, the truth that you didn't meet me there. And as painful as that is, it also freed me, because I stopped replaying the past trying to fix something that was never mine to fix. I stopped waiting for you to validate my pain. I didn't need your explanation to know I was hurt. I didn't need your apology to know I deserved better. Sometimes closure isn't a conversation. Sometimes it's the moment you stop giving someone access to a heart they already proved they wouldn't protect. After everything fell apart, the hardest thing wasn't trusting someone new. It was trusting myself again, trusting that my instincts weren't broken, trusting that my heart wasn't a liability, trusting that loving you didn't mean there was something wrong with me. Because when someone breaks your heart like that, you don't just lose them, you lose confidence in your judgment. You start second-guessing everything. Was I blind? Was I too much? Did I imagine the connection? And for a while I believed the problem had to be me. But slowly that started to change. I realized something important. I didn't ignore red flags. There weren't clear ones at the beginning. You showed up. You said the right things. You made me feel safe enough to trust. That wasn't stupidity. That was honesty. So instead of punishing myself for believing in you, I started respecting myself for how genuine I was. I stopped calling my openness a mistake, stopped treating my softness like a flaw, stopped blaming myself for someone else's inability to show up. Rebuilding trust meant accepting this truth. I didn't fail myself by trusting you. I honored who I am. And that matters, because if I harden completely, if I shut down every part of me that still wants connection, then the heartbreak wins twice. So I'm learning balance. I don't rush trust anymore, but I don't deny it either. I don't hand my heart over blindly, but I don't lock it away. I listen to myself now, to discomfort, to patterns, to silence that says more than words ever did. Trust isn't gone, it's just more intentional. and this time the first person I trust is me. Missing you doesn't mean I want you back. That took me a while to understand, because grief doesn't disappear just because you know someone wasn't right for you. Longing doesn't mean regret, and sadness doesn't cancel clarity. I miss the version of you I thought was real. I miss the safety I felt before things changed. I miss how easy it was before trust turned into doubt. But I don't miss the anxiety. I don't miss questioning where I stood. I don't miss feeling like I cared more. And that's the difference. If I wanted you back, I'd still be making excuses for you. I'd still be minimizing the hurt. I'd still be hoping you'd come back different. But I'm not. I just haven't rushed myself through the grief. Because when you trust someone deeply, losing them isn't just losing a person, it's losing a future you believed in. And that takes time to let go of. Some days I'm fine. Some days a memory hits out of nowhere. A song, a place, a random thought, and I let it pass. I don't fight it. I don't romanticize it. I don't pretend I'm over it faster than I am. Healing isn't about erasing what mattered. It's about accepting that something can matter and still not belong in your life anymore. So, yeah, I miss you sometimes, but missing you doesn't mean I forgot why I walked away. Heartbreak taught me patience in a way nothing else ever did. Not patience with people, patience with myself. I learned that healing isn't something you rush just to prove you're okay. It's not about jumping into something new to replace what you lost. It's not about pretending it didn't hurt, because it did, and pretending only buries it deeper. I stopped forcing myself to move on other people's timelines. Stopped letting anyone tell me I should be over it by now. You don't rush the healing of something you trusted. You let it take the time it takes. Some days I feel strong, other days I feel fragile for no reason, and instead of judging that, I let it exist, because every emotion I avoid just shows up later heavier. Patience taught me this. You don't heal by replacing someone, you heal by understanding why losing them hurt the way it did. I trusted you. That wasn't small, that wasn't casual, so yeah. It takes time to rebuild the parts of me that believed safety could be permanent, but I'd rather heal slowly and honestly than rush into numbness and call it strength. I'm not behind, I'm not weak, I'm not stuck. I'm just respecting the fact that real trust doesn't break quietly, and it doesn't heal quickly either, and that's okay. Forgiveness didn't come in the way people talk about it. I didn't wake up one day suddenly okay with what you did. I didn't excuse it. I didn't rewrite the story to make it hurt less. What I had to forgive was myself, for trusting you, for believing your words, for opening my heart when I knew how badly it could go wrong. For a long time I was harder on myself than I ever was on you. I kept thinking I should have known better. I should have seen it coming. I should have protected myself more. But that thinking only added another layer of pain, because loving honestly was never the mistake. I didn't betray myself by trusting you. I honored who I am. I showed up real. I was present. I was vulnerable in a world that tells people not to be. And yeah, that made the heartbreak deeper. But it also means nothing about my love was fake. Forgiving myself meant accepting this. I didn't lose because I trusted. I lost because someone couldn't meet me at the level I was willing to give. And that's not something I need to punish myself for. So I stopped replaying the past, looking for a version of me that could have avoided the hurt. There wasn't one. Sometimes pain isn't a warning you missed. Sometimes it's just the cost of being genuine with the wrong person. And once I understood that, the shame started to loosen its grip. I could carry the memory without carrying the blame. Trusting you taught me something I never wanted to learn this way. That love can be real and still not last. That intentions can be genuine and still fall apart. That opening your heart doesn't guarantee someone will protect it, but it also taught me something else, something important. I learned that the way I love isn't the problem. I didn't lose myself by trusting you. I didn't fail because I believed in us. I didn't weaken myself by being honest. I showed up as who I am, and that matters. You broke my heart, but you didn't break my ability to love. You shook my trust, but you didn't erase my values. You hurt me, but you didn't define me. What you really did was show me the difference between someone who feels safe and someone who actually is, between words and consistency, between effort and presence, between connection and commitment. I won't forget you, not because I want you back, but because you were a chapter that taught me how deeply I can feel. And next time, I won't give that depth to someone who treats it casually. I'll trust again, just not blindly. I'll love again, just not at the cost of myself. You didn't ruin love for me. You clarified it. And even though the heartbreak hurt, I walk away knowing this. I was real. I was honest. I was brave enough to trust. And one day someone will meet that trust with care it deserves. Until then, I carry the lesson, not the wound. That's where this ends. I think the hardest thing to admit now is that I waited too long for her. Not a few days, not a few weeks. I'm talking about months of believing that eventually she would see me the way I saw her. Because when you really care about someone, patience feels like loyalty. You tell yourself that love isn't supposed to be rushed, that real connections take time, that sometimes people just need space to figure things out. So I gave her that space. I stayed patient when things felt uncertain. I stayed loyal even when the energy between us started shifting. And every time something felt off, I told myself the same thing. Just give it time. Time would make her realize how much I cared. Time would make the connection stronger. Time would make everything finally fall into place. But looking back now, I realize something painful. Sometimes time doesn't fix things. Sometimes time just shows you what someone was never going to choose. And while I was waiting, she was slowly moving in a different direction. Well, when you wait for someone you care about, it doesn't feel like you're wasting time. It feels like you're being loyal. You tell yourself that patience is proof that your feelings are real, that if you just stay consistent long enough, eventually they'll see what's right in front of them. So that's what I did. I stayed, even when the signs started becoming confusing. There were moments where she would pull closer again, moments where the conversations felt like they used to, moments where she would say things that made it seem like maybe, just maybe, we were finally getting somewhere. And every time that happened, it reset my hope. It made me believe the waiting was worth it. Because hope is powerful. Hope convinces you that the future will eventually match the way you feel. But the problem with hope is that it can keep you standing in the same place while the other person is slowly walking somewhere else. And I didn't see that at the time, because while I was waiting for things to become clearer, she was slowly becoming less certain about us. And the scariest part is how quietly that shift happens. It doesn't start with a big moment. It starts with small changes, replies that come slower, conversations that feel shorter, energy that feels just a little different than before. At first you ignore it because you tell yourself the same thing you've been telling yourself the whole time. Just give it time. But sometimes time doesn't move people closer. Sometimes it slowly moves them away. And by the time you realize that, you've already waited longer than you should have. The strange thing about waiting for someone is that you don't realize how much time you're giving away until you look back at it. While I was waiting for her to figure out her feelings, my whole mindset was built around patience. I told myself that real connections take time, that people sometimes need space before they realize what's right in front of them. So whenever things felt uncertain, I convinced myself that uncertainty was just part of the process. I thought eventually she would see me the way I saw her, but the longer I waited, the more the relationship started feeling one-sided. Not in obvious ways. She still talked to me. She still checked in sometimes. She still kept the connection alive just enough that it never felt completely over. And that's the part that kept me there, because every small moment of closeness made it seem like progress. Like maybe we were finally moving towards something real. But looking back now, those moments didn't mean we were getting closer. They just meant she wasn't ready to fully let me go yet. And there's a big difference between someone building something with you and someone keeping you close while they're still figuring out what they want. At the time, I couldn't see that difference clearly. All I knew was that I cared about her, and I believed that eventually she would care about me the same way, so I stayed patient, even when the signs started becoming harder to ignore, even when the connection started feeling less stable than it used to. Because once you invest that much time waiting for someone, it becomes harder to walk away. You start telling yourself that leaving now would mean all that waiting was for nothing. So you stay longer, you give it more time, you hope just a little more, and that's how you end up realizing something painful later on. You didn't just wait for her. You waited too long. The hardest part about waiting too long for someone is realizing that the time you gave them was real, even if the outcome wasn't. Because every day I stayed patient, I believed it meant something. Every message I sent, every conversation where I tried to understand her better, every moment where I chose to stay instead of walking away when things felt uncertain, to me those moments were proof that I cared, proof that the connection mattered enough to fight for. But there's something difficult about waiting that you don't notice until it's already happened. Waiting slowly turns into hoping, and hoping slowly turns into ignoring reality. There were signs that things weren't moving the way I thought they were. Moments where her effort didn't match mine. Moments where the connection felt like it was staying in the same place instead of growing. Moments where it felt like I was investing more emotionally than she was. But every time I noticed those signs, I told myself the same thing. Just give it more time. Because when you care about someone, you don't want to believe the connection might not lead anywhere. You want to believe the patience will eventually pay off. But the truth is, patience only works when both people are moving toward the same thing. If one person is waiting, while the other person is slowly drifting away, time doesn't bring you closer. It just stretches the distance. And by the time I started realizing that, I had already waited longer than I should have. Another thing about waiting too long for someone is how quietly it changes your life, because when you're emotionally invested in someone, your decisions start revolving around them. You hold space for them in your future, you imagine what things could become, you avoid moving on because a part of you still believes they might eventually choose you. And that's exactly what I did. I didn't explore other connections. I didn't let myself get too close to anyone else because, in my mind, I was already committed to her, even if the relationship wasn't fully defined. And that's the trap of waiting. You stay emotionally loyal to someone who hasn't fully chosen you yet, not because you're naive, but because you believe loyalty will eventually be recognized. You believe that if someone sees how patient you are, how consistent you are, how much you care, they'll eventually realize you're the right person. But life doesn't always work like that. Sometimes people appreciate your patience, sometimes they even care about you, but that doesn't always mean they'll choose you. And that's a painful thing to understand, because it means the time you gave them didn't guarantee the future you imagined. And when that realization finally hits, you start asking yourself a difficult question. Was I waiting for the right person? Or was I waiting for someone who was never going to choose me in the first place? Once I started asking myself that question, honestly, everything began to look different. Because when you stop looking at the situation through hope, you start seeing it through clarity. And clarity shows you things you didn't want to notice before. Like how often I was the one reaching out first, how often I was the one trying to keep the connection alive, how often I was the one convincing myself that things would eventually work out. At the time, I thought that was just what patience looked like, but now I understand something important. Patience in a relationship only makes sense when both people are building something together. If only one person is investing time, effort, and emotional energy, that's not patience. That's imbalance. And I was standing in that imbalance longer than I should have, because I kept believing that eventually the effort would be returned, eventually the connection would stabilize, Eventually she would see me the same way I saw her, but eventually never came. And the hardest part about realizing that isn't just the heartbreak, it's realizing how much time you spent waiting for something that was never truly moving toward you. For a while, that realization made me feel foolish, because it made me feel like I should have known sooner, like I should have seen the signs earlier, like I should have walked away the moment things started feeling uncertain. But the truth is, caring about someone doesn't make you foolish. It makes you human. When you believe in someone, you want to give them the benefit of the doubt. You want to believe their uncertainty is temporary. You want to believe the connection you feel will eventually become mutual, so you stay longer, you give more time, you hope a little harder, and sometimes that hope leads to something real. But sometimes it just leads to a lesson. And the lesson I learned is something I'll never forget. You shouldn't have to wait indefinitely for someone to recognize your value. If someone truly sees you as part of their future, they don't leave you standing in uncertainty for months. They choose you, and they show that choice through their actions. Once I understood that, the pain started changing into something else. Perspective. Because waiting too long for someone doesn't mean you were weak. It means you believed in the possibility of something meaningful. And there's nothing wrong with believing in people, but there's a difference between believing in someone and ignoring the reality of their actions, because actions always tell the truth eventually. Someone who truly wants you doesn't keep you waiting forever. They don't keep you guessing about where you stand. They don't keep you in a place where you feel like you're hoping more than you're building. They make their intentions clear, and if someone doesn't do that, the waiting only leads to one outcome. Eventually you realize you were holding space for someone who wasn't holding space for you. When I finally stopped waiting for her, something surprising happened. I started getting my clarity back. Because when you're waiting for someone emotionally, a part of your life feels paused. Your focus stays tied to the possibility of what could happen. Your decisions revolve around the connection. Your energy stays invested in someone who might not even be moving in the same direction. But the moment you stop waiting, everything shifts. You start seeing things more objectively. You start realizing how much emotional energy you were giving to someone who wasn't fully present, and you start understanding something important. The time you spent waiting wasn't wasted. It taught you exactly what you should never accept again. Looking back now, I can honestly say I waited too long for her, but I don't regret caring. I don't regret being patient, because those things say something about who I am. What I do regret is staying in uncertainty longer than I should have, because the right person doesn't make you wait forever to feel chosen. They don't keep you in a constant state of hoping. They don't make you question whether the connection is real. They make their intentions clear. They meet your effort with their own, and they move forward with you, not away from you. So yeah, I waited too long for her. But that experience taught me something I'll carry with me forever. Next time I won't stay in a place where I feel like I'm waiting to be chosen, because the right connection doesn't feel like waiting. It feels like moving forward together. I don't care how corny it sounds, I'll never stop being a lover boy. Not until I get the kind of love I've always imagined. The kind where there is no one else, no distractions, no half-interest. Just one person in a world that feels smaller because of it. I want that kind of love where it doesn't wander, where nobody else even registers. Where loving them feels natural, not forced. The kind of love that feels cinematic without trying. Just two people driving nowhere, standing in open fields, traveling for no reason other than wanting to be together. The kind of love you don't just feel in your chest, you feel it in your soul, hot, intense, alive. And I don't understand how people walk around acting indifferent to that. Love is something casual, like it doesn't matter, because love is everything. Sharing the world with someone, learning their habits, knowing their moods, understanding them in ways nobody else does. Going from strangers to someone you can't imagine life without, there's nothing like it. And yeah, love comes with risk, heartbreak, loss, pain, but I'm here for all of it, because if that's the price of loving deeply, I'll pay it. I'll take the heartbreak, I'll take the uncertainty, I'll take the risk. The lover boy in me isn't dying. It can't. What makes it hard sometimes isn't loving deeply. It's loving deeply in a world that pretends not to care. People act like being attached is embarrassing, like wanting someone fully is something you should hide. They call it nonchalant. They call it cool. They call it protecting yourself. But to me, it just feels empty. I don't want love that's casual. I don't want half interest. I don't want to act like I wouldn't be crushed if I lost someone I care about. I want to feel it. I want the kind of love where my heart is all the way in. No exits, no backups, no pretending. And yeah, that makes me vulnerable. It means I get hurt easier. It means I feel things more intensely, but I'd rather feel everything than live numb just to look unbothered, because loving deeply isn't weakness, it's courage. It takes guts to say I want you fully. I'm choosing you. I'm not scared to care. And maybe that's why it feels lonely sometimes, because not everyone is built to love like that. But I am. And I'm not going to dull that part of me just to fit into a world that treats love like it's optional. Loving this way hurts more because you don't do it halfway. You don't keep one foot out the door. You don't love with conditions. You don't calculate how much to give. When you fall completely. And that means when things don't work out, it hits harder. You don't just lose a person, you lose the future you already imagined, the places you pictured going together, the version of yourself that only existed with them. People say, I don't get your hopes up, protect your hair less, but that's never been you. You don't know how to want someone quietly, you don't know how to love without meaning it, and you don't want to learn, because even when it hurts, loving deeply still feels better than pretending you don't care. Yeah, heartbreak changes you. It slows you down, makes you cautious for a while, but it never kills that part of you that believes in something more. And that's the difference. Some people close their hearts after pain. Others keep theirs open, not because they're naive, but because they refuse to let disappointment turn them cold. You don't love deeply because it's easy. You love deeply because that's who you are. And even when it costs you, you'd rather feel everything than live a life that feels empty. The truth is, you already know how this can end. You know love can break you. You know it can leave scars. You know it can take pieces you don't get back, and still you choose it. Not because you're reckless, not because you're desperate, but because a life without love feels smaller than a life with heartbreak. You're not chasing perfection, you're chasing connection. The kind that makes the world feel louder and quieter at the same time. The kind that turns ordinary moments into memories. The kind that makes you feel seen in ways words can't explain. People say love like that is unrealistic, that it only exists in movies or stories, but you've felt glimpses of it, enough to know it's real, and once you've felt that, you can't pretend you don't want it anymore. So yeah, you risk it again, you open your heart again, you believe again, not because you forgot the pain, but because you decided it wasn't stronger than your capacity to love. Being a lover boy doesn't mean you ignore reality, it means you face it and still choose love anyway. When you say you want that kind of love, you're not talking about perfection, you're not chasing fantasy or some unrealistic fairy tale ending, you're talking about presence, the kind of love where you don't feel alone even when you're silent, where being together feels natural, not forced, where effort doesn't feel like work. Is waking up and knowing there's one person in the world who chooses you without hesitation, not because they have to, but because they want to. It's traveling with no plan and still feeling grounded, standing in open spaces and realizing the world feels fuller just because they're next to you. It's loyalty without fear, commitment without control, love that feels intense but never unsafe. That's the kind of love you want. Not obsession, not possession, connection. The kind where you don't question intentions, you don't wonder where you stand, you don't compete with distractions, you're just there, fully, openly chosen, and wanting that doesn't make you unrealistic, it makes you honest. Because once you know how deeply you can love, you stop settling for anything that asks you to dim that fire. Waiting doesn't scare you, settling does. You've seen what happens when people accept less than what they feel. They grow distant, they grow quiet, they start convincing themselves that good enough is enough, and you don't want that. You don't want a love that feels convenient. You don't want someone who chooses you only when it's easy. You want someone who stays when it's real, when it's messy, when it requires effort. So you wait, not because you think you're better than anyone, but because you know yourself. You know how deeply you love, you know how much you give, and you know what happens when that kind of heart ends up in the wrong hands. You'd rather be alone than feel lonely next to someone who doesn't meet you where you stand. And yeah, some days it gets heavy, watching people pair off, watching others settle into relationships that look fine on the surface, but deep down, you're not jealous. You're patient, because you're not searching for company, you're waiting for alignment, for someone who doesn't flinch at your intensity, who doesn't joke about your softness, who doesn't treat your loyalty like it's replaceable. You're waiting for someone who wants the same kind of love you do, all in, no exits, and until that shows up, you're not lowering your standards, you're protecting your heart. If it ever happens, when someone finally matches your energy, you'll feel the difference immediately. Not fireworks, not chaos, not anxiety disguised as excitement, clarity. You won't question where you stand. You won't wonder if you're asking for too much. You won't feel like you're loving harder than you're being loved. It'll feel mutual in a way you're not used to. They won't flinch at your intensity. They won't joke about you caring too much. They won't act overwhelmed by the way you love. They'll meet it. Your effort won't scare them. It'll reassure them. Your loyalty won't feel rare. It'll feel natural. And the craziest part, you won't feel like you're chasing anything. No convincing. No proving, no waiting for them to catch up emotionally. They'll already be there. And suddenly, all that waiting makes sense. All the times you didn't settle, all the times you walked away, all the times you chose being alone over being half-loved. You'll realize you weren't asking for too much, you were just asking the wrong people. When someone finally loves you the way you've always loved others, it won't feel overwhelming. It'll feel right. At the end of everything, after the waiting, the heartbreak, the disappointment, the almost, one thing never leaves: your capacity to love. You don't lose it, even when people try to convince you that you should, even when the world rewards detachment, even when acting unbothered looks easier, even when caring deeply costs you more than you expected, because loving fully was never a phase for you. It's part of who you are. You were built to feel things deeply, to choose one person and mean it, to love in a way that's intentional, loyal, and complete. And yeah, that makes you vulnerable, but it also makes you real. The lover boy in you survives every heartbreak, not because you forget the pain, but because you decide it's not stronger than your heart. You don't regret loving, you don't regret believing, you don't regret wanting something rare, because one day someone will meet you in that same place. They won't laugh at your intensity. They won't treat your love like it's extra. They won't ask you to tone it down. They'll recognize it. And when that happens, everything you held on to will make sense. Though no, the lover boy in you doesn't die, he just waits. And when the right love finally arrives, he'll be ready. Sometimes I feel like love just isn't meant for me. Not in a dramatic way, not in a woe is me way, just quietly, like I've watched it find everyone else and somehow keep missing me. I've done the work, I've tried to heal, I've tried to be patient, I've tried to love right, and still, nothing sticks. People come close, but never close enough to stay. They show interest, but never intention. I'm always almost chosen, almost loved, almost enough. And after a while, you stop asking what's wrong with them and start asking what's wrong with you. You start wondering if maybe you're just built differently, if maybe you feel too deeply for a world that loves lightly. I don't think love avoids me because I'm unlovable. I think it avoids me because I don't fit into how people love now. I don't do casual well. I don't know how to care halfway. I don't know how to pretend I wouldn't be hurt if it ended. And that makes people uncomfortable. They like the idea of me. They like the attention. They like being wanted. But when it comes time to choose, to commit, to stay, they hesitate, so I end up alone again. Not because I didn't try, but because I refuse to chase what doesn't choose me back. And that's the part no one talks about. Sometimes loving yourself means accepting that love might take longer to find you, or worse, that it might not come at all. And that's a scary thought because I don't want much. I don't want perfection. I don't want fantasy. I just want someone who stays, someone who doesn't get overwhelmed by sincerity, someone who doesn't confuse depth with pressure. But the longer time passes, the quieter that hope gets. Not gone, just tired. I don't hate love. I don't resent it. I'm just starting to wonder if it has a place for me, and if it doesn't, I guess I'll have to learn how to live a full life without it. Not because I stopped believing, but because believing started to hurt more than letting go. It's not even the loneliness that gets me anymore, it's the pattern. How people come into my life with energy and leave with excuses. How they swear they like me, but never enough to stay consistent. Never enough to choose me when it's not convenient. Never enough to make me feel secure. And I'm tired of hearing the same lines in different voices. I'm not ready. I'm focusing on myself. You deserve better. And maybe I do. But why does better never turn into someone who stays? At some point you stop feeling unlucky and start feeling singled out. Like love has an address, and somehow it keeps getting my name wrong. I watch people get loved loudly, chosen publicly, protected without asking, and me? I get almost commitment, almost consistency, almost somebody's favorite, and that almost does something to you. It makes you question your personality, your looks, your worth, your timing. Like if you could just fix one thing, love would finally land. But then the quiet truth hits. Love isn't avoiding me because I'm impossible to love. It's avoiding me because I don't accept half love anymore. And that scares people because I don't want casual comfort. I want real intention. I want someone who doesn't disappear when it gets deep. Someone who doesn't treat effort like a favor. Someone who doesn't love me in waves. And if that kind of love doesn't exist for me, then I guess the hardest thing I'll ever do is stop waiting for it to show up. Not because I'm bitter, because I'm tired. After a while, you stop getting excited when someone new shows up. Not because you don't want love, but because you don't trust it to stay. So you hold back without meaning to. You don't open all the way. You don't imagine futures anymore. You don't let yourself get attached too fast, because every time you did before, it ended the same way. Distance, silence, someone slowly pulling away while pretending nothing changed. So now you detach early. Not out of coldness, do you? Out of self-defense. You start preparing for the ending before the beginning even settles. You keep one foot out the door because history taught you that staying hopeful hurts more. And the worst part, people feel that. They sense your hesitation, your guardedness, your quiet expectation that this won't last, and they match it. They don't go all in, they don't invest deeply, they keep things light, flexible, undefined, which only confirms what you already believed. Love doesn't choose you fully, so the cycle repeats. You expect love to leave. Love senses you're bracing, no one commits, everyone walks away, and you're left wondering if love avoids you, or if you've learned not to trust it enough to let it stay. That's the cruel part. You didn't become distant because you don't care. You became distant because you cared, and it kept costing you. So now you protect yourself by expecting less, and every time love passes you by, it reinforces the same quiet thought. Maybe love isn't meant to find me. Maybe it's meant to pass through. Eventually, hope stops hurting loudly. It just fades. You don't cry about love anymore. You don't rant about it. You don't even talk about it much. You just stop expecting it. You start telling yourself that maybe love is for other people. People who are easier, people who don't feel as deeply, people who fit better into how relationships work now. And that belief settles in quietly. You still show up. You still try when someone new comes around. But there's a ceiling now. You don't let yourself dream past the present. You don't imagine forever. You don't let excitement get too loud, because disappointment trained you You learn that getting your hopes up only makes the fall harder, so you keep them low, manageable, contained. People think you're calm, they think you're chill, they think you're emotionally mature, but really you're just tired of believing in something that keeps proving you wrong. You start romanticizing independence, telling yourself you don't need love anyway, that you're better off alone, that attachment is overrated, and maybe part of that is true. But another part of you still aches when you see people chosen easily, loved openly, protected without asking. You don't envy them. You just wonder why it never seems to be you. And the scariest thought creeps in, what if this isn't a phase? What if this isn't healing? What if this is just acceptance? Acceptance that love won't find you no matter how patient you are, no matter how much you grow, no matter how carefully you love. So you make peace with the idea that maybe love isn't your story, and that peace feels less like relief and more like surrender. At some point, you stop chasing love altogether. Not in a dramatic, I'm done with love way, but in a quiet, tired way. You stop looking for it in rooms, stop expecting it in conversations, stop wondering if this person might finally be different. You still show up, you still talk, you still connect, but the hunger is gone. Not because you're fulfilled, but because you're exhausted. You've wanted love for so long that wanting it started to feel embarrassing, like asking for something that clearly wasn't meant to be yours. So you replace longing with numbness. You tell yourself you're fine, that you don't need anyone, that independence is better anyway. And some days you believe it, but other days it feels like you've just buried something alive. You don't get butterflies anymore. You don't get excited about potential. You don't let yourself feel anticipation, because anticipation has disappointed you too many times. People mistake this version of you for healed. They say you're strong. They say you're grounded. They say you've matured. But what they don't see is how much of that softness you had to shut down to survive. You didn't stop wanting love because you outgrew it. You stopped because wanting it started to hurt too much. And now you're in this strange in-between place. Not heartbroken, not hopeful, just waiting without believing. And the thought that scares you the most isn't being alone. It's wondering if you've waited so long that even if love did find you now, you wouldn't know how to let it in. Sometimes the thought hits you that maybe love did try to find you before, and that's harder to sit with than believing it never came at all, because then you have to ask yourself, if you were too hurt to see it, too guarded to trust it, too used to disappointment to believe something good could last, you replay moments differently now. People who tried to get close, but you kept at arm's length. Connections you didn't fully invest in because you were already bracing for the end. Not because they were bad, but because you were tired. Tired of hoping, tired of opening up, tired of being the one who cared more. So you stayed cautious, you stayed reserved, you stayed prepared to lose, and maybe that protection kept you safe, but it also kept you distant. That realization stings because it means love wasn't always the one that failed to show up. Sometimes it showed up quietly and you were too wounded to let it stay. But even knowing that, you don't blame yourself. You were doing what you knew how to do to survive repeated disappointment. You weren't cold, you weren't careless, you were scared to believe again and have it fall apart like it always did. So you chose control over vulnerability, distance over hope, certainty over possibility, and now you're left wondering if love will ever feel safe enough again to recognize when it's real. That question lingers, not loudly, not urgently, just quietly in the back of your mind. At some point, fear quietly replaces hope, not all at once, not dramatically, just slowly. You stop expecting good things to last. You stop trusting excitement. You stop letting yourself believe that something real could finally choose you. So you protect your heart. At first, it feels smart, responsible, like growth. You don't overshare. You don't get attached too fast. You don't let people see how much you care. But over time, protection turns into distance. You're not just guarding against pain anymore. You're guarding against connection. You start filtering yourself, keeping conversations surface level, holding back emotions before they even have a chance to exist, and people feel that. They don't push deeper, they don't try harder, they assume you're not that interested, which feeds the same belief again. Love doesn't choose you. But what's really happening is that fear is deciding for you. Fear is telling you it's safer not to hope, safer not to want too much, safer not to open the door all the way, because every time you opened it before, something left, so now you keep it cracked, just enough to say you tried, never enough to risk getting hurt again, and that's the quiet tragedy of it. You didn't stop believing in love because you don't care. You stopped because caring started to feel dangerous, and the longer fear sits in the driver's seat, the harder it becomes to remember what hope even felt like. Eventually you start telling yourself you're better off alone, not because you don't want love, but because wanting it feels pointless. You say things like, I'm used to being by myself, I don't need anyone, I'm fine the way I am. And part of that is true. You're strong on your own. You have learned how to survive without being chosen. You can build a life that doesn't depend on someone staying. But there's another part you don't talk about. The part that still wants to be seen. The part that still wants someone to stay without being asked. The part that wonders what it would feel like to finally be someone's first choice. So you compromise with yourself. You don't hope, but you don't fully let go either. You live in this middle space where love is something other people get, and you quietly prepare for a life without it. You stop imagining shared futures. You stop picturing growing old with someone. You plan your life around independence because that's the only constant you trust. And people admire you for it. They call you self-sufficient. They say you're unbothered. They think you're healed. But healing isn't supposed to feel like convincing yourself you don't want something you still ache for. You didn't choose solitude because it fulfilled you. You chose it because disappointment taught you not to expect more. And the scariest part, the longer you live like this, the more normal it feels. Love stops feeling like something missing and starts feeling like something unrealistic. And that's when you wonder if love didn't avoid you at all. If you just slowly stopped believing you were allowed to have it. The truth is, you never stopped wanting love, you just stopped admitting it. You tell yourself you're fine alone, that you've outgrown the need for romance, that you're focused on yourself now. But late at night, when everything's quiet, that truth shows up. You still imagine being chosen, still wonder what it would feel like to be someone's safe place, still crave a love that doesn't hesitate. You just don't say it out loud anymore. Because admitting you still want love feels dangerous. It feels like setting yourself up for disappointment again. Like reopening a door you worked so hard to close, so you downplay it, you joke about it, you bury it under independence and self-control. But wanting love never made you weak. Being hurt just taught you to hide that want better. You learned how to survive without being chosen, but survival was never the same as fulfillment, and deep down you know the difference. You didn't stop believing in love because you healed. You stopped because believing started to feel like self-betrayal. Like hoping for something that never came was making a fool of you. So you chose silence instead. But that silence doesn't mean you're done wanting love. It just means you're tired of wanting it alone. At some point, you have to face the question you've been avoiding this whole time. Is love really done with you, or are you done believing in it? Because the truth is, love didn't disappear overnight. It faded every time you were disappointed, every time someone almost chose you, every time you opened up and watched it fall apart again. Eventually, believing started to feel stupid, like hoping for something that clearly wasn't meant for you. So you stopped. Not because you stopped wanting love, but because you couldn't handle wanting it alone anymore. You told yourself this is just how life turned out, that some people get love and others learn how to live without it, and maybe that belief protected you. It kept you from more heartbreak, more waiting, more letting yourself down, but it also cost you something. It cost you the ability to imagine a future that includes being chosen. It cost you the courage to believe something good could stay. So now you stand here, Not hopeless, not hopeful, just tired. Tired of wondering, tired of preparing for disappointment, tired of asking why love keeps missing you. And maybe the hardest truth is this: love didn't stop trying to find you. You just stopped leaving the door open, not because you're broken, not because you're unlovable, but because getting your hopes up hurt more than letting them go. And whether love ever finds you or not, one thing is clear now: you didn't lose because you loved too much. You lost because loving started to feel unsafe. So if love ever does come again, it won't be loud, it won't rush you, it won't demand you believe right away. It'll wait, and the real question won't be whether love finds you. It'll be whether you're willing to believe again when it does. You keep ignoring the red flags because all you want is love, not peace, not respect, not consistency, just love. You see the signs, you see the unanswered calls, the constant busy, the way you're always an option, never a priority. And instead of asking why it hurts, you ask how to endure it. You tell yourself it's patience, that it's loyalty, that love means staying even when it costs you. But let's be honest, she doesn't check on you, she doesn't consider your feelings, she doesn't show up the way you do, and you know that. You just don't want to face what it says about you for staying. So here's the real question you've been avoiding: how much do you actually love yourself? Because when you stay in situations that keep hurting you, when you keep accepting disrespect just to feel close to someone, that's not love, that's neglect. If you truly loved yourself, you wouldn't keep choosing pain just to feel wanted. You wouldn't keep lowering your standards to keep someone around who clearly isn't choosing you back. But you don't protect yourself, you sacrifice yourself, because being alone scares you more than being hurt. And that's why you accept the bare minimum. That's why you stay in toxic cycles. That's why you confuse attachment with love. You're not holding on because it's good for you. You're holding on because it's the only version of love you think you deserve. And that's the lie. You don't need someone else to complete you. What you actually need is to stop outsourcing your worth. Because the moment you start loving yourself, really loving yourself, you stop begging for attention. You stop tolerating disrespect. You stop calling pain connection. You stop chasing people who only show up halfway. Self-love doesn't make you selfish. It makes you unavailable to anything that keeps breaking you. And until you learn that, you'll keep calling suffering love and calling survival loyalty. You are worth more than crumbs. You are worth more than confusion. You are worth more than being an option. But no one can convince you of that until you decide to believe it yourself. Here's the truth you keep avoiding. You don't stay because you don't see the red flags. You stay because you think leaving means nobody else will love you, so you make excuses. She's busy. She's going through stuff. She just doesn't show love the same way. But effort isn't a love language. It's a choice. And when someone keeps choosing not to show up for you, that's not confusion, that's clarity. You're not being patient. You're being hopeful in a place that's already shown you who it is. You keep giving grace to people who wouldn't give you the same. You keep explaining your pain to someone who already decided it wasn't important enough to change. And every time you stay, you send yourself a message. My feelings come second. My needs are optional. This is the best I can get. That's not love. That's self-betrayal. You think walking away means losing them, but what you're really losing right now is respect for yourself, because someone who values you doesn't make you question your worth. They don't make you beg for consistency. They don't disappear and call it space. And the reason this keeps happening isn't because you love too hard. It's because you don't love yourself hard enough to leave when you should. The moment you start choosing yourself, red flags stop looking like obstacles and start looking like exits. And exits aren't failures, they're protection. Ignoring red flags doesn't just hurt you once, it trains people how to treat you. Every time you stay after disrespect, you teach them you'll tolerate it. Every time you forgive without change, you show them your boundaries don't mean much, and they adjust accordingly. They respond less. They try less, they care just enough to keep you around, but never enough to show up fully. Because why would they? You already proved you'll stay without effort. You think you're being understanding, but what you're really doing is normalizing behavior that shouldn't have access to you. You answer late replies immediately. You accept apologies without accountability. You let patterns repeat because you're afraid of starting over, and slowly, your standards drop while their comfort rises. That's the trade you're making. You're giving someone emotional safety while you live in emotional uncertainty. And the worst part? You start blaming yourself. You tell yourself you're asking for too much, that you're sensitive, that this is just how relationships are. But healthy love doesn't require endurance. You don't have to survive it. You don't have to fight for basic respect. You don't have to convince someone to treat you well. Red flags aren't challenges to overcome. They're warnings to listen to, and the longer you ignore them, the harder it becomes to remember what being valued even feels like. The pattern doesn't break when they change, it breaks when you do. The reason you keep ignoring red flags is because you confuse attachment with love. Love feels steady, attachment feels urgent. Love doesn't make you anxious. Attachment keeps you checking your phone, replaying conversations, wondering where you stand, and you call that passion. But what you're really feeling is fear. Fear of being replaced, fear of not being enough, fear that if you don't hold on tight, you'll be forgotten. So you cling, you stay when you should leave, you wait when there's nothing coming, you accept excuses because they're easier than facing the truth. That truth being, someone who wants you won't make you feel optional. Attachment makes you chase because it needs reassurance. Love doesn't chase, it meets. And until you learn the difference, every red flag will feel like something you just need to work through. You'll keep calling distance space, disrespect miscommunication, inconsistency timing, but your body already knows that tight feeling in your chest, that constant unease, that feeling of giving more than you're getting. That's not love warning you to try harder. That's your self-respect telling you to stop. You don't need clearer signs. You don't need closure. You don't need one more conversation. You need the courage to admit that attachment is keeping you stuck in places love would never ask you to stay. Walking away feels harder than staying because staying lets you avoid the truth. As long as you're still there, you can tell yourself it might change, that maybe tomorrow they'll care more, that maybe you're just being tested. Hope keeps you stuck because leaving means admitting you invested in something that wasn't good for you. It means admitting you ignored your instincts, that you stayed longer than you should have, that you loved someone who couldn't meet you halfway, and that hurts your pride. So instead, you endure. You tell yourself pain is temporary, that love requires sacrifice, that every relationship has rough patches, but here's the part you don't want to hear. Love doesn't consistently make you feel small. It doesn't drain you. It doesn't confuse you. It doesn't make you feel like you're asking for too much just by wanting basic respect. You stay because leaving forces accountability, not for them, but for you. It forces you to ask why you accepted less, why you ignored the signs, why you stayed quiet when your boundaries were crossed. And that's uncomfortable. But staying is costing you more than leaving ever will. Every day you remain in a situation that disrespects you, you reinforce the belief that this is all you deserve, and that belief is the real damage. Walking away isn't giving up on love, it's giving up on self-betrayal. And the moment you finally choose yourself, red flags stop feeling confusing. They feel obvious. The moment you stop ignoring red flags, everything gets quiet. No chaos, no anxiety spikes, no constant checking to see if someone still wants you. And at first, that silence feels uncomfortable because you're used to confusion, used to emotional ups and downs, used to love feeling like something you have to manage. So when you finally walk away, your brain starts questioning you. Maybe I overreacted. Maybe I should have stayed. Maybe this is just how love feels. But that's just withdrawal. You're not missing them. You're missing the familiarity of the pattern because ignoring red flags wasn't just about them. It was about what you were willing to tolerate to avoid being alone. Now that you've chosen yourself, you start seeing things clearly. You realize how drained you were, how often you made excuses, how little you were actually asking for compared to how much you were giving, and that clarity changes you. You don't feel pulled toward inconsistency anymore. You don't chase mixed signals. You don't feel tempted by people who only show up halfway. Because once you experience peace, chaos stops feeling exciting. You stop romanticizing struggle. You stop believing love has to hurt. You stop confusing anxiety with connection. And here's the biggest shift. You stop trying to be chosen. You start choosing. Who gets access to you? Who gets your time? Who gets your emotional energy? Red flags don't feel like puzzles anymore. They feel like answers. And instead of asking me, can I make this work? You ask, does this protect me? That's when self-respect kicks in. Not loud, not dramatic, just firm. When you stop ignoring red flags, people from your past don't recognize you anymore. Not because you changed for the worse, but because you stopped being convenient. You don't explain yourself as much. You don't over-justify your boundaries. You don't stay in conversations that feel disrespectful or draining, and that confuses people. They're used to the version of you that stayed quiet, that gave chances, that tried to understand at the expense of being understood. So when you walk away faster now, they call you cold. They say you've changed. They say you're doing too much. But what they really mean is you're no longer available for the dynamic they benefited from. People who thrived on your tolerance don't like your standards. People who were comfortable with your silence don't like your clarity. And that's okay, because growth isn't about being liked, it's about being protected. You're not harsh, you're not bitter, you're not closed off. You're just done negotiating your self-respect. You no longer wait for disrespect to become unbearable before leaving. You don't need proof anymore. The first pattern is enough. And here's the part that matters most. The right people won't question this version of you. They won't push your boundaries. They won't test your tolerance. They won't need you to over-explain. They'll feel your standards and meet them naturally. Anyone who leaves because you stopped accepting red flags was never meant to stay anyway. That's not loss, that's alignment. Self-respect feels lonely at first, not because you're doing something wrong, but because you stopped tolerating what everyone else normalized. You don't have constant access to people anymore. You don't have drama to distract you. You don't have half connections keeping you entertained. And that quiet can feel heavy, because for a long time, chaos made you feel needed, inconsistency made you feel chosen, fixing things made you feel valuable. Now none of that is there, and your brain tries to convince you that you're missing out, that maybe you were happier when you stayed, that maybe standards are overrated, that maybe being lonely is worse than being disrespected. But that's just the adjustment period. You're unlearning a pattern where love had to hurt to feel real. Self-respect strips away the noise and leaves you with truth. You start seeing how many connections were built on convenience instead of care. How many people stayed because you made it easy for them, not because they valued you. And yes, that realization stings, but it also gives you something you didn't have before. Peace, no guessing, no waiting, no emotional whiplash, just clarity. And from that clarity, your standards get quieter but stronger. You don't announce them, you don't defend them, you just live by them. And anyone who can't meet you there falls away naturally. Loneliness isn't punishment here. It's space to rebuild your sense of worth without someone else validating it, space to remember who you are when you're not chasing or fixing or proving, and soon that loneliness turns into confidence. Not loud confidence, stable confidence, the kind that doesn't rush, the kind that doesn't beg, the kind that knows red flags aren't obstacles, they're directions. At some point you realize something uncomfortable. You don't actually miss them. You miss the version of yourself that kept trying to be enough. You miss the effort you gave, the hope you held on to, The belief that if you just loved harder, things would finally change because chasing gave you purpose. It made your pain feel meaningful. It made waiting feel justified. It made disappointment feel like part of the process. Now that you've stopped, there's nothing left to fix. And that's when the grief shows up. You grieve the time you spent trying to earn what should have been given freely. You grieve the energy you poured into people who never poured back. You grieve the patience you mistook for love, not because you were foolish, but because you cared. And it hurts to admit that caring didn't save anything. You start seeing clearly how often you ignored your own voice, how many times your body told you to leave while your heart begged you to stay. You stayed loyal to people who weren't loyal to your peace, and that realization is heavy, because now you can't go back, you can't unsee the patterns, you can't pretend disrespect was accidental, you can't convince yourself that red flags were just misunderstandings. You've outgrown the version of you that survived on hope alone, and while that growth is necessary, it still feels like loss. But here's the truth. You didn't lose something real. You let go of something that only existed because you kept tolerating it. And the more distance you get, the clearer it becomes. What you were missing wasn't love, it was self-respect. Ignoring red flags was never about love. It was about not wanting to choose yourself. Because choosing yourself meant walking away without guarantees, without reassurance, without someone else filling the silence, so you stayed. You told yourself love takes patience, that people need time, that your pain was just part of the process, but deep down, you knew the truth. You weren't staying because it felt right. You were staying because leaving felt terrifying, terrifying to be alone, terrifying to admit you deserved better, terrifying to sit with the idea that you chose someone who couldn't choose you back, though you ignored the signs. Not because you didn't see them, but because seeing them meant action, and action meant accountability. But here's what finally clicks. Red flags don't hurt you. Ignoring them does. Every time you stayed, you taught yourself that your needs were optional. Every time you excused behavior, you taught yourself that love should be endured. Every time you waited for change, you delayed your own growth. And that cycle doesn't end when someone finally treats you right. It ends when you stop accepting what treats you wrong. Choosing yourself doesn't mean you stop wanting love. It means you stop betraying yourself just to keep it. It means you walk away sooner. You trust discomfort. You listen the first time something feels off. Not because you're cold, but because you're done confusing pain with connection. And once you reach this point, red flags don't feel complicated anymore. They feel clear. You don't argue with them. You don't negotiate with them. You don't try to turn them green. You leave because now you understand something you didn't before. Being alone is temporary, self-betrayal is cumulative, and you're no longer willing to pay that price. That's not bitterness, that's self-respect, and that's where the cycle finally ends. I'm romantic. I believe in effort, in choosing someone daily, in love that feels intentional, not accidental, but I'm not naive anymore. I don't confuse chemistry with commitment. I don't mistake words for consistency. I don't fall in love with potential and ignore reality to protect the fantasy. That version of me is gone. Being romantic doesn't mean I overlook red flags. It doesn't mean I excuse disrespect. It doesn't mean I stay just because I feel deeply. It means I love with awareness now. I still want connection, still want intimacy, still want something real, but I'm no longer willing to sacrifice my peace just to keep a feeling alive. I know the difference now between someone who feels good and someone who is good for me. I know the difference between affection and effort, between attention and intention, and I don't chase illusions anymore. I won't romanticize someone who can't show up consistently. I won't soften the truth to protect a story I wanted to believe in. I can be tender and still have boundaries, hopeful and still realistic. Romantic doesn't mean blind. It means I care deeply, but I pay attention. And this time I don't fall in love at the expense of myself. I used to think being romantic meant enduring, staying longer than I should, giving the benefit of the doubt even when doubt was all I felt, believing that love meant patience no matter the cost. That's where it went wrong. I mistook tolerance for depth. I confused hope with commitment. I kept softening my boundaries to protect a version of love that wasn't protecting me. That wasn't romance, that was self-abandonment. Being romantic doesn't mean I ignore patterns. It doesn't mean I wait for someone to become who they promise to be. It means I listen when actions contradict words. It means I leave when effort fades. It means I don't negotiate respect just to keep a connection alive. I still believe in love that's big, in feelings that are deep, in choosing someone with intention. But now, romance has standards. I won't pour into uncertainty. I won't romanticize inconsistency. I won't stay where I feel anxious and call it passion. Romantic love should feel safe enough to be honest, stable enough to be real, mutual enough to last, and if it isn't, I don't try to fix it anymore. Because I can be romantic without being reckless with my heart. Being romantic but not naive changes how you choose people from the very beginning. You don't rush connection anymore. You don't get swept up by intensity. You don't confuse attention with alignment. You let things unfold. You watch how someone shows up when it's inconvenient, how they communicate when things are unclear, how they act when they don't get their way. Because attraction is easy, consistency is not. You stop falling for the idea of someone and start paying attention to how they actually treat you. Do they follow through? Do they respect your time? Do they show curiosity about your inner world? Or just enjoy how you make them feel? Being romantic doesn't mean you stop feeling sparks. It means sparks aren't enough anymore. You want safety with the spark, effort with the chemistry, clarity with the feelings, so you slow down, not because you're scared, but because you value yourself too much to rush into something unproven. You let people reveal who they are without trying to fill in the gaps for them. And if something feels off, you don't romanticize it. You listen, because the right connection won't need you to ignore yourself to keep it alive. Being romantic without being naive means I still believe in love. I just don't chase it blindly anymore. I don't force connections. I don't convince people to choose me. I don't stay where effort feels one-sided and call it patience. I let love meet me where I am. If someone wants me, I won't have to guess. If someone cares, I won't have to ask repeatedly. If something is real, it won't require me to ignore my instincts. I still believe in late-night talks, in choosing each other, in building something meaningful, but I don't sacrifice clarity for intensity anymore. I've learned that love isn't proven by how much you're willing to endure. It's proven by how safe you feel being yourself without shrinking, performing, or waiting. So now I don't rush toward feelings just because they're strong. I let actions catch up to words. I let time reveal truth. I let consistency do the convincing. And if someone can't meet me there, I don't make it mean love is dead. I just understand that not every connection is meant to last. I can still be soft, still hopeful, still romantic. I'm just no longer willing to lose myself for the sake of a feeling. Being romantic, not naive, changed what I tolerate. I don't excuse inconsistency anymore. I don't sit with confusion and call it giving things time. I don't ignore the feeling that something is off just because I want it to work. Before, I'd stay and explain. I'd adjust. I'd wait. Now, I observe. If effort fades, I notice. If respect slips, I address it once. If nothing changes, I leave. Not angrily, not dramatically, just clearly. I don't feel guilty walking away from things that don't align anymore, because walking away isn't punishment, it's protection. I used to think romance meant holding on. Now I know it also means knowing when to let go. I still care deeply, still feel intensely, still believe in choosing someone with intention, but I won't romanticize potential at the expense of reality. I won't stay where I feel anxious, unseen, or unsure of my place. Romance without boundaries is just hope with no direction. And now, my heart has standards, not walls, standards. Being romantic and grounded makes love feel quieter than I expected. There's no chaos, no guessing games, no emotional roller coaster disguised as passion. And at first that felt strange. I was used to intensity proving something, used to anxiety meaning I cared, used to confusion keeping me invested. But that wasn't depth, that was instability. Now, romance feels calm. It looks like consistency. It sounds like clear communication. It feels like not having to overthink where I stand. There's still excitement. It's just not fueled by uncertainty. I don't need constant reassurance anymore. I don't need dramatic gesture to feel chosen. I don't need to be chased to feel wanted. Because when something is real, it doesn't keep you on edge. Being romantic doesn't mean I crave fireworks every moment. It means I value safety with the spark, peace with the passion, connection that doesn't cost me my balance. And the biggest shift, I don't mistake calm for boredom anymore. I understand now that love doesn't have to be loud to be meaningful. Sometimes the most romantic thing is feeling secure enough to just be yourself. Being romantic, not naive, changed how I communicate my needs. I don't hint anymore. I don't water things down to avoid being too much. I don't stay silent hoping someone will just figure it out. I say what I need, not aggressively, not defensively, just honestly, because needing clarity isn't pressure. Needing consistency isn't insecurity. Needing effort isn't asking for the world, it's asking for alignment. Before, I was scared that speaking up would push people away, that if I asked for more, I'd lose what I had. Now I understand something important. If honesty scares someone off, they were never meant to stay. I don't over-explain myself anymore. I don't apologize for having standards. I don't negotiate my needs to make someone comfortable. Romance doesn't mean silence. It means trusting that the right person won't feel threatened by clear communication. They won't call it drama. They won't call it too much. They won't make you feel guilty for wanting to feel secure. They'll listen, they'll respond, they'll meet you where you are. And if they don't, I don't take it personally, because being romantic, not naive, means I'd rather be understood slowly than misunderstood forever. Being romantic with boundaries filters people out quietly. You don't have to test anyone, you don't have to interrogate intentions, you don't have to force clarity. You just stay consistent with who you are, you show up honestly, you communicate clearly. You don't overgive to keep someone interested, and that alone does the work. People who only wanted attention get bored. People who thrived on ambiguity get uncomfortable. People who wanted access without effort slowly fade, and you let them, not because you stopped caring, but because you stopped chasing. Being romantic, not naive, means you don't audition for love anymore. You don't prove your worth. You don't compete for consistency. You don't bend yourself to be easier to choose. You let people meet you where you stand, and the ones who can't, they remove themselves. That used to scare you. Now it reassures you, because the right connection won't need you to lower your standards to keep it alive. It will rise to meet them. And the most romantic thing about that, you don't have to lose yourself to find love anymore. I still believe in love. That part never left. What changed is who I trust first. I believe in myself now. I trust my intuition when something feels off. I trust my boundaries when they need to be held. I trust my heart without handing it over blindly. Before, I believed love required risk at any cost, that you had to jump first and hope someone caught you. Now I know better. Real love doesn't ask you to abandon yourself. It doesn't punish you for being honest. It doesn't require you to doubt your worth to keep it alive. Being romantic, not naive, means I still dream. I just don't disappear into the dream. I don't ignore red flags to protect the fantasy. I don't silence my needs to keep someone comfortable. I don't romanticize suffering and call it devotion. I let love add to my life, not destabilize it. And the biggest shift of all, I don't fear losing love anymore the way I used to, because I know I won't lose myself trying to keep it. That confidence didn't come from love finding me. It came from me finally standing with myself. Being romantic, not naive, means I didn't lose my softness. I refined it. I still believe in love that's intentional, in effort that's mutual, in choosing someone without hesitation or games, but I no longer confuse love with endurance. I won't stay where I feel uncertain. I won't fight for clarity. I won't romanticize someone's potential while ignoring how they treat me now. Romance isn't blind faith anymore. It's awareness. It's knowing that feelings matter, but actions matter more. That chemistry is exciting, but consistency is what lasts. That love shouldn't cost you your peace, your voice, or yourself. I still want something real. I still want depth. I still want connection that feels meaningful. I just won't abandon myself to get it. If someone meets me with honesty, I open my heart. If they meet me with effort, I lean in. If they meet me halfway, I walk the rest with them. And if they don't, I don't force it. I don't chase it. I don't grieve what was never aligned. Because being romantic doesn't mean I accept less. It means I know exactly what kind of love I want. And I'm patient enough to wait for something that doesn't ask me to be smaller, quieter, or less aware. I'm still a romantic. I just finally learned how to protect my heart without closing it. And that's the difference. She said I wasn't man enough, and I won't lie. That one stuck, not because I believe it, but because when someone you love questions your masculinity, it hits somewhere deeper than regular criticism. It's not just about behavior, it's identity. It's everything you thought you were doing right suddenly being reframed as weakness. What does man enough even mean? Because I showed up, I communicated, I stayed loyal, I tried to fix things instead of run from them. But apparently that wasn't enough. Apparently being calm instead of aggressive was a problem. Apparently wanting to talk things through instead of shutting down made me soft. Apparently expressing emotion made me less of a man. And that's when I realized something dangerous. Some people confuse masculinity with dominance. They confuse emotional control with emotional absence. They confuse stability with weakness. And if that's the definition she was using, then maybe I was never supposed to fit it. But still, when she said it, it made me question myself. Because no matter how confident you are, words like that linger. They make you replay moments. They make you wonder if you should have been tougher, colder, less available, less understanding. And that's how toxic standards start reshaping you quietly. I started analyzing everything after that. Was I too patient, too willing to compromise, too quick to apologize? Because I thought being a man meant being responsible, being accountable, being emotionally mature. But maybe she wanted something louder, more dominant, more unpredictable, and that's confusing because society tells men two opposite things. Be strong, but don't be cold. Be vulnerable, but don't be weak. Lead, but don't control. And somehow you're supposed to balance all of it perfectly. So when she said I wasn't man enough, I started wondering, was I too emotionally available? Was I too steady? Was I not exciting enough? But here's the truth that took me time to accept. Being consistent doesn't make you less of a man. Being calm doesn't make you less masculine. Being emotionally intelligent doesn't make you weak. It makes you evolved. And not everyone is comfortable with evolved. Some people are used to chaos, used to intensity, used to men who are hard to access emotionally. So when they meet someone who communicates clearly and stands firm without yelling, it feels unfamiliar. And unfamiliar can feel unmanly to someone who's been conditioned differently. But that's not my problem to fix. The deeper issue wasn't her words. It was what they tried to take from me. My confidence, because when someone attacks your masculinity, they're attacking your foundation. They're saying you're not enough as you are, and that's heavy. But here's what I had to learn. If being man enough means being emotionally unavailable, if it means suppressing how I feel, if it means pretending I don't care, if it means dominating instead of communicating, then I don't want that version of masculinity, because strength isn't loud. It's controlled, it's stable, it's secure enough to not overreact. It's confident enough to not prove itself constantly. And maybe she mistook calm for weak. Maybe she mistook kindness for softness. Maybe she mistook emotional awareness for insecurity. But that doesn't redefine me, it just shows what she was used to. What hurt the most wasn't that she left, it was that she framed it like I lacked something, like I needed to become more, like I needed to step up into some undefined standard. But love isn't about becoming someone else to fit someone's idea of masculinity. It's about alignment. If she needed someone louder, more dominant, more emotionally distant, that's preference, not proof that I wasn't enough. Wasn't. Because being man enough shouldn't mean performing toughness. It should mean integrity, leadership, emotional control, responsibility, and I had all of that, just not in a way that matched her expectations, and that's okay. I realized something important after sitting with it. The right woman won't question your masculinity. She'll feel safe in it. She won't need you to be aggressive to feel protected. She won't need you to be emotionally shut down to feel secure. She won't test your dominance to measure your worth. She'll recognize strength in stability. She'll see leadership and accountability. She'll see masculinity in consistency, because real masculinity isn't about intimidation, it's about presence. It's about knowing who you are without needing to prove it constantly. And here's the part nobody talks about. Sometimes when someone says you're not man enough, what they really mean is you're not toxic enough for what I'm used to. Because chaos feels passionate to some people, silence feels strong to some people, emotional distance feels masculine to some people, but healthy masculinity feels boring if you're addicted to instability, and that's not an insult, it's reality. Some people equate unpredictability with strength, and when they meet steadiness, they don't know what to do with it. I had to ask myself something hard. Was I actually lacking, or was I just not performing? Because there's a difference. Lacking means I don't possess something. Performing means I'm pretending to. And I refuse to perform masculinity for approval. I refuse to become colder just to seem stronger. I refuse to suppress my emotional intelligence just to look dominant. Because the right person won't require that. They'll appreciate it. If anything, being called not man enough forced me to define what that means for myself. To me, being a man means standing on your word, protecting without controlling, communicating without yelling, being emotionally disciplined, owning your mistakes, leading with stability, and I did all of that. So if that wasn't enough for her, it doesn't mean I failed. It means we defined strength differently. I won't let one person's perception reshape my identity, because masculinity isn't loud. It isn't about dominance. It isn't about intimidation. It's about internal control. It's about consistency. It's about knowing who you are when no one is watching. And if someone mistakes calm strength for weakness, that says more about what they're used to than what I am. She said I wasn't man enough, but I am man enough to walk away instead of yelling, stay calm instead of escalating, express how I feel instead of suppressing it, choose growth instead of ego, and that's the kind of man I'll stay, because the right woman won't need me to prove my masculinity. She'll feel secure in it, and I'd rather be steady and misunderstood than loud and respected for something I'm not. If being man enough means losing emotional depth, then I'll pass, because real strength doesn't shout, it stands.